Chapter 41. Reaching Naboo again. With the Looker Hulks gone, the jamming of the planet had disappeared. We could now freely contact the ground forces. Contact Commander Thorn, I said as I walked to the holotable at the back of the bridge. The hologram of Commander Kalen Thorn popped up as I entered, and he saluted me with his hand horizontally positioned to his eyes. Supreme Commander, he shouted. Supreme Commander and Sir were the general way for soldiers to formally salute me. Admiral Jamie, General Tyr, Lord Commandant, and the Council called me Count, or other formal ways of calling me, mainly as I'm the leader of Thyferra for them, but to the military I'm the Supreme Commander or General, depending. Might also change it to Supreme Leader, as Commander fits more for General Tyr when we grow our military might. Or I might have Grand Admiral and Grand General, we'll see. At ease. What's the situation down there? I asked, and he took down his salute and put his hands behind his back. Sir, the battle droids have all shut down due to the disintegration of the Looker Hulks centrally controlling the droids. The Gungans are currently clearing the droids and double-checking them, he said. As expected, all the droids died once the capital ships were taken out. What about Queen Amidala and the capital? I asked. According to his earlier report, they fought in the jungle, where the Gungans used their agility to its utmost potential. Queen Amidala is still in our camp, however. She's getting more and more determined to launch an attack on the capital. However, our spies told us that the droids were still active there for some reason. However, the Gungans are slowly bending to her arguments and I can't hold her for long. He said, of course, Amidala had to demand the immediate attack of the capital. She probably didn't understand the potential consequences. A surrounded man is a dangerous and unpredictable man, especially the greedy Nimodians. His defeat won't come as a surprise. He knew his fleet had lost and now the Viceroy likely wanted to gain something to help him in the surrender negotiations. And getting a shit ton of hostages is one way. Alright, we'll send reinforcements down. Try to keep her off by arguing about our support, I said, and he saluted. Yes, Supreme Commander. It will be done, he said before cutting the transmission. I turned to my war council beside me. Army, General Tyr, Special Forces, Lux, Royal Guard, Alexander, Navy, Admiral Jamie, Starfighters, Flint. Any ideas on how they still got droids running? I asked into the air, not directed at anyone specifically. They could have another centralized control panel inside, Lux said. Honestly, I bet that he's right and they have another centralized control panel. They might have a few elite droids with their own control panel, not requiring a centralized panel, Tyr said, and I nodded. The Trade Federation did that later. Viceroy Gunray might have brought his own private organic army. The Nimodian Royal Guards are famous for their discipline, Alexander said. PFT, of course, he knew about other Royal Guards. What a nerd. I agree, they also have the Trade Federation Home Defense Legions. They are well trained and armored, Admiral Jamie said, and I nodded. There are multiple possibilities, I said as I pressed a few buttons, activating a hologram of our planet. Alright, on to our positioning. Any ideas? I said as they looked at it. We need to form a blockade. If Viceroy Gunray is still alive, then the Trade Federation might prepare a rescue task force. Flint said he was right. The Viceroy had tens if not hundreds of Looker Hulks, and Gunray was worth more than all of them. I agree, we must keep a blockade. However, we would still require a few cruisers in the atmosphere. We might require orbital bombardment, General Tyr said, and I narrowed my eyes. The chances of us requiring orbital bombardment were low. After all, Padme would never let us bombard her capital city. We're attacking the capital city. It's not a plain field. We can't bomb their capital city. We'd make an eternal enemy of Naboo, Alexander exclaimed. He was one of the more politically strong members due to him being with me most of the time. I agree, none of our battleships can be used, but our battlecruisers can, I said as the picture of our fleet showed up. Battleships were the designation of the capital ships we had: Munificent, Gladiator, Valiant, and ISD. Meanwhile, the battlecruisers were small escorts, like the Cumulus Corsairs and Carracks. The CR-90 and Cumulus were of the smallest battlecruiser size but still technically it. Then we had the cruisers, the CR-90 Corvette, and DP-20, which was what we had. This was the designation for capital-class ships. However, there were ships with cruisers in their names without being a capital ship. I agree. I say we send the 10 Cumulus-class Corsairs and 5 CR-90s. The Cumulus has strong underside turrets, but they're not too powerful. They're capable of sniping individual houses and buildings, while most others would destroy multiple. The CR-90s will be good to transport supplies and injured troops off the battlefield, Admiral Jamie said, and I nodded. I agreed with that decision. What do you want us to do, sir? Lux said. His Marines could serve as an extremely efficient knife. Their jetpacks and skills would serve us extremely well within the city. You'll deploy directly on top of the palace. We'll have you inside the Cumulus. 250 can stay inside on each, so 2,500. Based on the weather, we might have you stand on the deck of the Cumulus or top hangar, I said, and he nodded. General Tyr, you'll take over strategic command. The Gungans are strong in close combat but weak in distance, so mix them with our own forces, I said, and he nodded. The Gungans had strong shields capable of absorbing blaster bolts. Understood, my lord, he said, and with that, I decided to end it. Flint, keep the remaining 55 Skurg H-6 bombers on standby in the Gladiators. We'll keep them behind to deploy them the fastest. We might need a few bomb runs, I said, and Flint saluted. It will be done, my lord, he said, and I nodded. Well, let's get down there. Shall we? I said as I began walking. But not before walking to my room. I equipped myself with my Mandalorian armor, 2 commando pistols, an actual jetpack, my ARC 9965, and lastly my Nadin Vibrasword. The ARC 9965 was a custom order from Blostech Industries. It was used by Darth Carrot Galactic Empire, 130 ABY. It was an improvement of the E-11 used by Palpatine's Galactic Empire. It was meant for accuracy and power, meaning it had less ammunition capacity. The bolt was stronger than the DC-15A, but its fire rate was a bit above the DC-15S. All in all, it was an extremely expensive piece of weaponry. It cost about 3,000 to make the gun itself, and the ammunition was twice the price of the blue ones used by the Republic. Due to being made by Blostech Industries, it used Tabana gas, and through multiple processes, it was changed to a particle beam. The laser in itself was blue, and due to a higher amount of Tabana gas and higher quality crystals. The blaster gas cartridges cost 1.500 each to build, the usual ones cost 1.250, but mine could only hold 4,000 blaster shots, while the usual could hold 5,000. I might consider just changing our main gun to this. After all, this is amongst the top 10 most powerful guns to exist in the galaxy. Well, there were more powerful, but this was the most reliable and suitable for me. After getting suited up, I exited my room and headed down to the hangar. Once I arrived, I was met by my 6 bounty hunters and lastly, Santo. I had kept him away from the bounty hunters, and it was the right decision. I could already feel Bosk's hate, and the tension in the air. However, the 200-man Sovereign Guard also stood there in formation. They stood in 2 blocks of 100 while the bounty hunters stood in the middle, in a little group. Santo stood at the edge with Alexander, while Bosk stood straight in front of them. What is this? I thought I get to kill Wookiee assist, Bosk said, with his tongue slithering. Tongue. Santo is my personal guard, and you won't be able to kill him. I'll let you 2 fight after this battle, but if he wins then you got to stay clear of him, am I understood? I said, and he nodded. Bosk, although having a deep hatred of Wookiees, still respected strength above all. Or he wouldn't follow Boba. Good now. We'll be launching an assault on the capital city of Naboo. Our mission will be to destroy the last Trade Federation forces on Naboo and capture Viceroy Gunray. I repeat, capture. Do not kill him, although you can give him a few unnecessary punches or kicks. No greeting better than physical trauma. I said, and a few of them smiled, including Aura Singh, Bosk, and Denga. They're mercenaries after all. Alexander, you and the Sovereign Guard will join us as well in attacking the capital. I said. Yes, my lord. We'll ensure your safety. He exclaimed. Honestly, I wouldn't require anybody else than those 200 men. They could probably fight and kill 2,000 droids alone, even more if the situation is correct. All right, get on to the lots. I said as I pointed at the lots standing around. Each could hold 30, and there were about 7 of them, but a lot more stood around, and General Tyr's men were boarding them one after another. We couldn't take all of them at the same time, so we would send batches down here. And with that, I walked to the closest one. Alongside the bounty hunters, John, Rob, Santo, and Alexander, and another 20 Sovereign Guards. Pilot, get us down to Senior Commander Thorns' position, I said, while pressing my communications device. It will be done, sir. I got a response, and I noticed that voice. Shocking to find you flying a transport vehicle. Thought that was beneath you. I said into it. Well, someone has to make sure your majesty get down safely, Fenrau said back. Yeah, the guy who crashed his ship about 20 minutes ago. I don't know how he survived without any injuries, but I heard something about him jumping out. And his Mandalorian customized armor allowed him to fly back into the hangar. Well, try to relax your ego. Maybe your getting shot down will be enough. I joked, and he began laughing. Too bad, after all, if I'm shot down, then you'll almost definitely die, he said, and I chuckled. Well, get us down there, Fen. Don't want to keep the Queen waiting, I said before cutting the communication. All right, Alexander, organize the Sovereign Guard when we arrive. I'll take John, Rob, Santo, and 5 men with me, but the rest will be with you, I said before turning towards the bounty hunters. Y'all are free to do whatever you want, but stand close to the Sovereign Guards. You'll join them in the battle, I said, and they all resolutely nodded. I suggest you get some communications devices from our armory, so that you can talk with the rest of the troops easier. And Bosk, don't touch the Gungans, all right? Or generally don't start any fighters, I said, and he nodded, though he was a slight bit irritated that it was specifically aimed at him. He wasn't that bloodthirsty. He probably thought. But truly, he was. Chapter 42. Preparing for the attack. The doors closed as we flew out of the hangar. The lots were specifically made with vacuum protection, allowing the troops to be secure while we flew through space. Although it only allowed for a few minutes in space and it didn't have a hyperspace, perfect for flying out of the ship to the planet. On the way I basically talked to the guys inside, Denga was especially talksome today and couldn't stop talking about how he wrecked 232 droids during the battle. Meanwhile, Bosk and Santo were standing in each corner of LAT, simply staring at each other. I'll need to get that duel set up as soon as possible. Soon enough we entered the atmosphere and headed to the Gun-Gon military camp. They were situated about 3 kilometers away from the capital city. They had the entire shit surrounded. Although Thorn was busy keeping Padme away from charging the city, he'd still surrounded and blockaded the city. I could see the capital in the LAAT. They opened the doors when we entered the atmosphere. The capital was surrounded on all sides by gigantic catapults, used by the Gungans. However, there were also LAAT/C flying in Candra's-class assault tanks and AV-7 anti-vehicle cannons. Each capital had a few lots, especially the Munificents. The Munificents had a large cargo space and we had a lot of lots inside those, and they were then transferred to the hangars when the naval battle was over. We flew over the city, and throughout it, I could see big pockets throughout the city. Every major road, parking spot, and open area had hundreds of thousands of organics sitting around, surrounded by droids. However, even the droids weren't dumb enough to only carry their standard blaster rifle. No, they carried heavy repeating blasters, capable of mowing down tens of thousands every minute. Or that was what our reports and my macro binoculars said. There might be a few differences, but that's the main thing and problem. If the droids get any indication of an attack, only 60 droids can mow down 10,000 citizens every second, and think of how many thousand droids there are, which is why we need to calm Padme the fuck down. Alright, land in the main camp. I told Fen through my communications. Roger that. The response was. And with that, we headed down to the main camp. It was situated opposite to the main city entrance. It had a shield surrounding it, protecting the camp from any surprise attacks. Although it was a bit too much considering the fact we had total air superiority and multiple squadrons patrolled the area at all times. We landed just barely outside the shield and I headed in. 5 guards, John, Rob, Santo, and Alexander followed me. As we headed through the shields, the hundreds of Gungans running around, some picking up droids, other commanders briefing their subordinates. All of the Thyferran soldiers saluted me as I passed through the swarm of men running around. After a bit of walking, I arrived at the command center. It was an elevated position with stairs going up to it. In the middle there was one holotable, showing the city, the known droid positions, and our army. We need to attack. My people are suffering. A female voice shouted, without a doubt Padme. Mesa agree with Padme. Wisa must destroy Thesa bunkers. Captain Tobler Seal said, wanting to destroy droids. If we attack now hundreds of thousands of civilians will die. Haven't you seen the droid security? They're carrying weapons meant to kill civilians. Sailon Thorn said, being the only calm one there. I agree with Commander Thorn, launching an all-out assault now is the wrong move, both in strategy and protecting the civilians. Viceroy Gunray is desperate, and a desperate man is dangerous. I said while walking up the stairs, making every eye turn to me. Huza is Yusa? The Gun-Gon leader said. I'm Count Thalron Veridian, leader of Thyferra and the supreme commander of the navy over your planet and the newly arrived troops. I said, making both the Gun-Gon leader and captain scrutinize me. They had never seen me before. The one standing here were the Naboo officials, Queen Amidala, 2 of her handmaidens, Captain Quarsh, and his second in command. From the Gungans there were Jar Jar Binks, Captain Tobler Seal, and the leader of the Gungans, also known as Boss Ruger Nos. Lastly, there were the 2 Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn. And of course Thorn from our forces. I too, agree with Count Thalron and Commander Thorn. Attacking now is not the wisest course of action. Qui-Gon said, just in time for General Tyr to also join us. What do you suggest then? Padme asked to nobody specifically. I could also see a slight anger, but it's good that she listens to her advisors. Yeah, I agree. Although we can't launch a large-scale offensive, we still have to do something. The Trade Federation will try and save their viceroy. If we drag this out they'll launch a new attack, and this one we won't win without the Republic. I said and General Tyr began speaking. We can't perform a proper siege and starve them out. That won't be probable even if we didn't have a bad time. General Tyr said. Mesa agree, more time Isa bad. The Gun-Gon boss said, he probably just wanted his soldiers home. I suggest we launch a nighttime surprise assault, take a few elite troops, and attack during the night. Droids need to recharge, which is usually done during the night so about 30% of their forces will be out. Thorn said. I agree. I got 5,000 Marines with jetpack available. They can drop onto the droids in the shadows of the night. It's the best way to not lose Naboo or their citizens. I said and they all nodded slightly. Mesa have an itty-bitty elite unit, the captain said. How many? General Tyr followed up with. Mesa have 10,000, from Dessa Royal Guard. He said, after checking something. Alright, so tonight we launch the attack? Padme asked. And you're staying back here, I said and she immediately got angry, though I think she understood my reason. What? We're attacking MY City, where MY people live. How can I stay back? She exclaimed, outraged. Precisely. If you die the morale of over 2 billion troops and hundreds of millions of humans will completely vanish. I said, the Jedi and my commanders agreed. Padme had been the light of this entire war. The population held out due to her. They suffered a month of blockade but still held hope. But, you're going? You're also a leader of your planet. She said, trying everything to let us allow her to join. But I've been given years of combat training. I'm surrounded by 200 of my best men and my armor is laser-proof, unless they hit a headshot, and most droids don't do headshots. I said, he's right. Droids are programmed to aim at the body, not the head. And I've seen 2 of his guards, they helped me fight Maul. Kagan said, surprisingly joining the drama. I guess he wanted to gain my favor. Maybe he'd take Anakin with him to me if the council refused him. Can't I join Count Thalron? His guards will automatically protect me as well. She asked. I think she bought over a few people with that comment. It doesn't matter, the fact still remains you'll be in danger. Captain Quarsh said. He for once agreed with us. Honestly, I kind of understood why Padme followed the attack on the palace. They needed a commander and a morale booster. But we had already won ground and air superiority. The remaining Trade Federation forces could not win against us. I could see that Padme was downright sad. I could even see slight wetness in the corner of her eye. Queen Amidala, I understand your desire to protect your planet, but you must see beyond the battle. Although we are winning, the battle within the city is unpredictable and we can be pushed back. But if you die while we're being pushed back, the chances of us winning will decrease by 50% and our army might simply disband. I said, and she began thinking. She finally understood the full extent of the weight lying on her shoulders. You create this alliance if you fall. Chances are that you'll end the alliance as well. I said, and she finally gave up. We had a few good points and she knew it. Fine, I'll stay back. She said finally, good. All right now. To sum it up, we're sending 200 Veridian Royal Guards, 5,000 Thyferran Marines, and 10,000 Gungan Royal Guards. Now, how do we get them in? General Tyr said. Well, the Marines and Royal Guards will be dropped by the Corsairs. I said. Gungan forces sent by Mesa water channels. The Gungan boss said. I pressed a few buttons on the map. They were taken by the pictures from Corsairs, and were somewhat live. I zoomed into the various water channels throughout the city. The city of Naboo had multiple water bodies and small water areas. Like how Kagan and Obi-Wan entered the capital the first time. Very few of them are guarded. And that's mostly patrols. Thorne said, and I nodded. I agree, it's plausible. Captain Quarsh, do you have any men inside the city? I asked and he stepped up. As they entered the city I put about 1,500 men spread throughout the city. They're hid in these different locations. Last reports say they're still there. He said as he pointed out the locations. We put red dots there. It would be smart to gather extra forces there. These men know the city best. And if the numbers are correct we can have one of them for every 10 of our other men. General Tyr said. I agree. Are there any reports of tanks within the city? I said, the map didn't show tanks and not precise droids. A single droid on the map could be from 12 to 120 troops. Our agents state that there are about 2 AATs in a team, and 4 teams patrol every large road throughout the city. Quarsh said. Shit, we'd need heavy guns then, Thorne said. We'd need to arm our men with detonators and rocket launchers, maybe even ion grenades. I said as I looked at the map. What security does the tanks have? Any extra droids? I asked Quarsh. Each droid tank has about 30 droids to it. Each team has 60. He said. We could have the men hijack 2 tanks on each major road. Due to their positioning, they could be surrounded as the tanks can only go on the roads, not between houses as it's too small. I said. Try to keep the damages to a minimum. Amidala said quietly. Sadly, that option was thrown out the minute Gunray barricaded himself inside the city. I said and she nodded. I think she said it as a joke. All right, and we need to get everyone to connect to the same frequency. We'll be jamming the enemies, or honestly we will at all times. Alexander said. How does Mesa attack Theed? The Gungan captain said. I then zoomed onto the map. We should focus our attack on the palace. Focus 2,500 Gungans to the small island surrounding the palace. I'll focus 4,000 out of my 5,000 Marines here. Everyone else will be running attacks on the droid forces holding civilians hostage. I said. The palace was surrounded by a small patch of land, and around that there were water canals, and as such it could be called a small island. Have 1,000 Gungans come from both sides of the small patch of land and 500 come from the front. They should have 3 tanks standing in front of the stairs. We'll perform precise bombardment from the Cumulus Corsairs when needed, so call it in if you end up fighting them. I said again. Our Marines won't just enter from the ground. We'll go through windows and side entrances. The palace has a lot of breakable windows, which should be perfect for a quick and dangerous attack. General Tyr said. Also, we should perform a heat scan of the palace, to get an understanding of where Gunray and his soldiers might be, the bonus of them using droids. Alexander said. Smart. If it went right then we could swoop right in and take Gunray. Alright, unless someone has something else to say, I suppose this is the end. Prepare your troops. We're attacking at precisely 0200 tonight. I said and they all nodded, walking away. I wonder what Maul is doing. Maybe Sidious gave him new orders to protect Gunray instead of killing Padme, Kagan, and Obi-Wan. And will those droids be there? I'd like to get revenge. Chapter 43, Battle of the Theed Palace. Night rolled around. All around me was the white sky. Yes, I had decided to be a dumb fuck and stand on top of the cumulus. Well, technically I was still in the hangar, but I sat on the walls looking out. Under me stood Alexander. He was shouting, "My lord, you should really get down, it's not safe." He tried. "It's fine, Alexander. I got a jetpack. Besides, there's like 4,200 people in the proximity whom would jump after me." "Fine, but please be careful, I don't want to be fired," he said, unhappy with my decision but understanding the incoming battle would be more dangerous. It was currently 1:52. We were flying towards Theed, the capital city of Naboo. The Gungans were traveling by water, while we had to jump down from the ground and straight into the temple. Luckily Kagan and Obi-Wan was joining us. They had both been offered a pair of jetpacks but refused. Apparently their mission had changed after Padme's security was ensured at the base, and they were now tasked with capturing the newly discovered Sith and bring him in for questioning. Why they didn't bring Mace for missions such as this is beyond me. His entire skill set is in the end to use the dark side without using it. Kinda. And he's perfect for fighting Sith. It's a reason he won against Palpatine in single combat. Naboo truly was a beautiful planet. We were scheduled to arrive in about 5 minutes, giving us 3 minutes to prepare before the attack. Naboo had large green plains. The plains were never identical, littered with bumps, hills, rivers and animals. The Gungans and the Naboyans, don't know if you call them that, had cut the planet in two. The Gungans had control of the large water bodies and the swamps surrounding it. They also had the 5th largest plain under them, the other 4 going to the Naboyans. This was for them to use agriculture above the water. They had grown specific underwater plants, but it couldn't give them all the nutrients they needed, and therefore they needed plants filled with sun energy, which wasn't usual in underwater plants. Time flew by as I eyed the Naboo planet, and appreciated the full extent of their beauty. Naboo was truly a hidden gem, both in its geniuses such as Padme and Palpatine, but also its planetary beauty. Don't know how this isn't a famous tourist attraction. Soon enough Lux's voice came through the comms. "This is Colonel Lux. Jump is in approximately 175 seconds. He said, and I stood up. With that the ship stopped and more climbed onto the actual hull. Meanwhile the doors under us slowly opened, revealing a back ramp, capable of 4 men standing side by side. Lux and Alexander then approached me. "What's our main points of attack?" I asked Lux. He had developed the attack strategy. "We'll send you, Alexander's team and 500 Marines to the top part of the palace, including the council room, royal quartiers. We'll then deploy another 1,500 throughout the building, and lastly 2,000 outside. 1,000 in various areas within the city, and 1,000 to the front patch, to deal with the tanks and their forces there. We'll need to clear it to get Gungan reinforcements," he said, and I nodded. "All right, very good. Make sure you have a few E-webs to set up defensive positions, and rocket launchers in case they have E-webs," I said, and he nodded. E-web was an extremely powerful version of a repeating blaster. It had the fire rate of AZ-6 minigun, but it had the power of a sniper, something between a sniper and a spider droid. Those were the small thing out there no shooting. This made them extremely dangerous and reputable as the best corridor defensive gun emplacement possible. This was also why I always had someone able to reinforce us with it. If we lost this battle, then we could situate ourselves in a corner, 2 E-webs, 1 on each side. Create a proper kill zone and we could live there comfortably for a few days. If we reinforced the windows and didn't suffer planetary bombardment, of course. "Yes, my lord. I've got 15 teams with E-web turrets." Lux said. The E-webs had to be transferred in parts, so 2 people needed for the body and another for ammunition. "All right, well, we'll move on your count," I said, and Lux saluted me, before walking towards the rest of the unit. I checked the clock. It was not 2:59. "We'll start in under 1 minute. Alexander, have your men ready," I said as I took out my ARC 9965 blaster rifle. "Yes, my lord. We'll be ready," he simply said, taking out his dual pistols. He had recently taken after me and carried dual pistols, alongside his staff. The pistols worked much more efficiently in co-use with jetpacks. I didn't respond but simply began looking over my gun. I had already done it a few times, but it always paid off to be precautious. Soon enough, the green light began blinking on my comm bracers situated on top of my Mandalorian warm bracers. I looked around to see everything too looking down on their device. "All right, let's move out," I said as I simply took a step forward, and began falling. I looked behind me to see that Alexander was right behind me, about 3 meters, and furthermore 10 meters behind me. 200 men fell off. I pointed my body straight down and pressed a few buttons on my bracers, making me enter stealth mode. Power in my Mandalorian armor was hidden by a device, making it seem dead, so that no power sensors could detect me. My radar told me the others did that as well as their dots slowly disappeared. There was about 250 meter-ish to the ground, and I was falling at roughly 30 meters a second, meaning I didn't have a lot of seconds until I hit the ground. I saw the palace come fast into sight as I got through the small cloud above me. An arm screen showed me the meters I was at, It was currently pointing at 100. As it hit 50, I started the jetpack up and rotated my body, so that instead of my head facing the ground, my boots did. That slowed my speed a lot, and at 10 meters, I stopped. All around me the same happened.
Alexander, then the Sovereign Guard, then another 2,000, while another 1,000 stopped then flew in the direction of the city, and the last 1,000 remained a bit over us.
I took 2 fingers out, the 2 closest to my thumb.
I then made a slashing motion straight down, and with that I flew down. So did the 2,500 other men around me.
We split up, 500 in each unit, while 500 plus my royal guards followed me. I quickly identified the main area. It was sticking out and had a lot of decorations and large windows. My jetpack screen then changed, showing me the radar of power, essentially the droids. I aimed at a corridor. I could see a droid patrol of 6 walking there. Alexander noticed the same. Him, John and Rob too joined me. I boosted my speed, then at the last second rotated my body, so that my boots went forward. I went straight through the glass and into one of the droids, but my force sent another droid to the ground. The droids didn't have time to react before another 3 individuals flew through the window, performing the same action as me, putting the rest down. I turned my gun around and shot the droids on the ground. I'd be stupid to think a little brunt damage would kill them. While I was doing that, 2 royal guards came flying down, and in their arms was a rookie. He had his arms outstretched with each royal guard holding him under his armpits. It was a comical sight, but I felt bad for the royal guards.
After all, a Wookiee was not an easy package to lift. I could see their sweat and hardship. They had to travel slowly downwards. But the good part was that it was only downwards and not upwards, and he kind of held on to them as well.
I pressed another button on my gauntlet and a hologram came up. Palace blueprints, given to us by Quarsh.
If I'm correct, then by traveling this corridor a few hundred meters and then up a few stairs, we should be in the Royal Queen's room. And I doubt Gunray would let the option to sleep in a Queen's room pass. Let's head to the Queen's quarters, I said to the men around me, numbering about 250.
The 200 royal guards, plus 50 marines. I kept my map on as we moved through the corridors. I could hear slight fighting throughout the building, and I bet Gunray did too. All right, let's use our jetpacks.
Get your asses into gear,
I shouted as I activated my jetpack and zoomed through the corridors.
Most of the palace had long corridors with very few corners, allowing us to travel 500 meters in less than 30 seconds.
We reached the stairs and I zoomed up. However, I held back a bit as John and Rob pushed forward while Santo kept running beside me. Although Santo was large as fuck, he's still surprisingly fast and kept up with us, although we did slow down a bit. As John and Rob arrived up the stairs, they were immediately fired upon. However, somehow they used their force staffs in the air, blocking them. As I got up, I saw our welcoming party.
Firstly, I spotted Viceroy Gunray run out of his room and around a corner to his left and my right. It would lead to the council room.
Before I began fighting, I spoke into my comms. Gunray is heading through the corridor from the Queen's quarters to the council room, I said before cutting my connection. Instead of going all the way up, I stopped just as my head reached above me. Holy fuck, they actually have B2s. In front of me stood a welcoming party of 12 B2 super battle droids and 46 B1 battle droids.
Be careful of the large ones. They have extra armor,
I shouted as I took aim with my rifle. I focused on the B1s. They were a lot easier to kill and was a problem in their large numbers. While I was thinking and aiming, about 200 men flew above my heads and engaged the droids in single combat. They were demolishing the B1s. Some dumbass guy named Gunray never thought to place his elite units between his expendable ones. No, they were in a line in the back, completely unable to fire. The Marines joined me in the stairs and unleashed fire, but very precise and carefully, not wanting to hit our own.
Fly above them and pursue Gunray,
I shouted as I started up my jetpack and began flying. Santos, John, Rob and Alexander was in the middle of the fight. Santo had pushed through and were engaging the B2s alongside John, Rob, Alexander and 5 others. They were being pushed back but slowly getting the upper hand. I took out an ion grenade and flew above the battle. The corridor was large enough for 3 battle droids to stack over each other, so it was enough space. As I flew over then, I passed the B1s and entered the B2 area. I threw the grenade, shutting 5 of them down. The B1s were down to only 12 droids, and slowly our men were pushing on. However, only a few could fight at all times due to the corridor, so when I flew over,
a lot of the royal guards understood my intention and those in the back did the same, following me and the Marines.
As I passed the corner, I flew at max speed, and soon enough, I was met with Gunray. His escort included 18 B2s and 4 B1s. However, he was stuck. Around a corner, one of my E-Web teams had set up a defensive perimeter and the only way out was around that corner. But that wouldn't happen anytime soon. However, he didn't spot me, so I increased my jetpack speed to an unhealthy amount and sped forward. He was left unguarded in the back due to focusing all his forces on the front, and I flew straight into him. With my feet first, of course, he hit the ground with a big dunk and began shouting. I stood above him and aimed my gun at his head. The B2s were turning around, just in time for the Marines to land between me and the B2s, ensuring they couldn't safely kill me without me killing Gunray. Shut the fuck up and order them to stand down, if you value your life.
That is,
I said, and he immediately shut up. This greedy motherfucker cared so much about his life that he could ignore pain. Stand down.
Stand down.
His ugly voice shouted. Good.
I said, as his B2s but their guns down, or in position.
How do I deactivate all the droids in the city? And do you have any organic forces? I asked him.
UM must destroy T the main C controller. It's in T the Council M meeting room. He said. I didn't respond and simply looked at a Marines beside me and he simply nodded, before taking 20 guys and flew towards the meeting room.
Now, what about your own forces? I asked again.
I sent them W with the Sith, against the J Jedi.
He said. Holy fucking shit, I screwed up. Chapter 44. Rescuing the Jedi. I fucked up. Where is the Jedi? I shouted into my comms and Lux responded. They followed Viceroy Gunray to the hangar. He tried to flee alongside what seemed like an organic unit. He said. Fuck, Gunray is here. Which means it was a trap. Who's with them? I asked Lux. A company of 200 Marines. He responded. Okay, so they're not totally alone. Send all available troops to their position. I have Gunray captured. The Jedi are walking into a trap. I said. Shoot. All right.
I'm diverting 500 troops from the palace and 1,000 in the city to the hangar. They'll be there in a few minutes.
He said, and I turned to Alexander. Take John, Rob, and 100 men and join them.
I can bet on that our Sith friend is there. I might pop by as well. I said and he nodded, although he was reluctant to leave me. But I had Santo and 100 other sovereign guards with me. Plus Gunray was my hostage.
And with that, Alexander and his team flew off. All right, kill the remaining droids.
I told the 30 Marines and 100 royal guards around me. They shot their already aimed guns at the droids. They were outnumbered and not allowed to resist, so they fell quite easily. Contact headquarters and get us a transport and escort out of this capital. I said as we began walking towards the meeting room. All the while Gunray openly tried to bribe my guards, so I got Santo to stay beside him and smack him every time he talked.
Worked like a charm. Anyway, soon enough we reached the meeting room.
The Marines the B2s had originally fought had already moved on towards the hangar, to help the pair of Jedi. As we entered the meeting room, a surprising sight greeted me. Inside sat all the counselors of the Naboo Royal Council. However, alongside that, in the middle of their circle there was a big generator, and around it stood 5 of my men, with technical equipment, trying to shut it down. Hello again, councilman and woman, I said as I arrived. They were all visibly relaxed, probably exhausted after close to a week of not knowing what was going to happen and being at death's door every second. We'll get you a transport to Queen Amidala if you wish, or you can wait here until the fighting is over, I said as I entered. A conflicted expression came on each of their faces. On one hand, they could ensure their safety, but on the other hand, they'd lose face with Padme and the people for escaping when they required it. In the end one stepped up. If his medal is concerned, he is the Counselor of Economy. I guess he lives up to the reputation of his position and being a greedy coward, but in the end, I can't fault him for wanting to be safe. You too, take him to the palace hangar. I'll send an LA to there, I said while pointing at 2 of the Marines. They saluted me, before approaching the guy and asking him to follow them, and with that they walked out. I turned to Bibble. Set up a city-wide screen to inform the people of their security once we win, and if possible send it to all the cities. I said. All right, I'll deal with it, but I need some manpower from our own Naboo forces. He said. I'll have Quarsh send over a few men. I said as I turned to another Marine. Contact Captain Quarsh and get him to send over a few Naboo self-defense troops. I said and he saluted, before turning on his wrist comms. And with that, time passed and soon it reached the 10-minute mark. My lord, we have completed the firewall and we are now in control of the droids. One of the slicers said. Order the droids to remove any handcuffs, shielding, or other obstacles keeping civilians in place, and shut them down. If they don't have any obstacles then just shut them down. I said as they got to work. During this time a team had already come and taken away Viceroy Gunray. He was currently away safe and sound, with the exception of Padme engaged in her usual attempt to make the enemy feel guilty, which of course didn't work. Alright, what's the status of the Jedi rescue mission? I asked Lux, whom had joined me during these last 10 minutes. According to reports, they still engaging the 2,500 Nimodian guards and 1 Sith in the hangar. They're making a last stand and we've got 3,000 Marines there, 100 Royal Guards, and 2 Jedi. The Gungans are not helping due to their inability to fight in long range without shield generators. He said. Alright, well let's join them. I said, and I had a slight chuckle seeing Lux's reaction. My lord, you can't possibly think of going there. There's a Sith there? Plus 2,500 elites who would aim at you. They're not like droids who can't see who the leader is? He exclaimed. Why has everyone been having the same reaction every single time I fight? Relax. I'm just going to command the battle. I won't go to the front lines. I said, which was true. I just wanted to be there to make sure the Jedi got to duel the guy called Darth Maul. I needed Kagan to die for the council to let Anakin in. And make sure he doesn't die after all. Don't want motherfucking Teresa hunting me down. She and her Dathomir witches were not something I would mess with. If she got my blood she could kill me before my soldiers got there. Count Dooku was lucky they made the move, and killed her before she could kill the Count. Fine, but don't blame me if you die. He said before walking ahead alongside the 200 Marines with him. 50 remained and the remaining 100 royal guards followed me.
Again we used jetpacks. We exited through one of the broken windows and headed for the hangar. It would be the fastest route.
After about 1 minute of flying we arrived. The hangar was filled with chaos, Marines flying around, and all the while the Nymodian royal guards were fighting for their life. They had set up defensive positions in the power generator, around the door. And in that door stood Maul, the Sith apparently.
He mainly stood there and blocked some shots, but left the rest to us.
They had 3 E-webs while we had 7 put up. However, it was still quite equal. Even though our men had more training, the royal guards had a shit ton of experience and it showed. They flawlessly moved from position to position, filling every single defensive weakness and focusing fire on one specific target while the rest barely held onto their part.
This counteroffensive tactic was what held our men back.
As I arrived, the battle was at its climax. People dying left and right, rockets flying left and right.
Apparently, the royal guards had stood back. The battle was too dangerous for them to push through, which I agreed to. As I arrived, I met Alexander, who was commanding the battle until now, alongside Captain Quarsh. As I arrived, Alexander saluted me while Quarsh nodded.
"What's the situation?"
I asked as I approached.
"About 500 casualties yet, but we have inflicted 300 on them."
Alexander said an attack was always heavier in terms of casualties than a defense.
"Is there any backway into the reactor?"
I asked Quarsh.
"We would win if it was."
"No, sadly."
"We thought the same but we can't find one,"
he said.
Of course they hadn't found one.
That was likely the first thing they thought.
"Would you mind if we destroyed the whole hangar?"
I asked Quarsh, who didn't look amused.
"Yes, I would mind,"
he replied. "Shoot, I wanted to bombard this shit."
"All right, well, we'll have to use some aerial bombardment,"
I said, turning to Lux.
"Call in 2 lots, and have them propped with rockets. We'll destroy that entrance if we have to," I said, and he nodded, before turning to his comms.
"Order your men to stand down. It doesn't matter if they predict it, they likely are.
We'll charge through those motherfucking doors after the lots are down. Alexander, bring forward smoke grenades. When the lots launch their rounds, throw it, then send your royal guards in." I said. The royal guards excelled in close combat situations and with a disoriented enemy, smoke. Nothing could be more perfect. They also had genetic scanners in their helmets allowing them to see the enemy and their own.
"Yes, sir. Right away," he said before talking to a few Marines behind us.
"All right, now we just got to wait for those lots. Call back all forces," I told Lux again, and he responded, "Yes, Supreme Commander," before he too ran off, to talk with some of the men, I guess. A few seconds after that, the gunfire died down as we retreated to safe positions.
I also got a notification that 2 lots were on their way.
Alexander got himself and his team ready. However, I had also sent Bosk, Embo, and Denga with him. While Aura remained as a sniper, she didn't stop fighting and occasionally sniped one of them, just to keep the pressure up. After 7 minutes, the lots arrived. However, they didn't stop to chat. They got straight to work. As they flew in the entrance and towards the reactor doors, they launched their rockets straight at the Nymodians. The Nymodians expected some large weapons, but not 2 of them firing fucking rockets straight at the power reactor. They chose the power reactor as a spot because people couldn't simply perform aerial bombardment above a reactor, because if it got destroyed, it would disintegrate the power of anything within the entire city and more, perhaps even reaching the base. The rockets the 2 lots sent demolished their defensive position. They each released 12 rounds of rockets. Each round had 2 rockets, so a total of 24 per liter, or 48 in total. As soon as the last rocket was released, about 60 smoke grenades were thrown onto their position, followed by 203 charging men, 200 sovereign guards, and 3 bounty hunters. After them again came about 500 Marines, flying into the air and towards the power reactor, to demolish any attempt to regroup there. Fighting could be heard through the smoke, with red lasers exiting the smoke left and right, but with time they slowly diminished. I looked at our signal. It was a radar that showed organic heat, but each of our soldiers had a special frequency radiating off them, allowing us to see which soldier was ours. According to that, we were demolishing. Each of the royal guards had been whooping up soldiers while being outnumbered over 10 to 1, and these weren't normal soldiers. But the strength of the sovereign guards in terms of close combat was unmatched, and when 2 Jedi joined the fray, they simply didn't stand a chance against us. Until Maul arrived and baited the Jedi away. Not that it mattered. It was now 1,300 to 172. We had inflicted 1,000 casualties while only suffering 28, which was great. However, 12 of them happened when Maul attempted to bait the Jedi, and attacked our men alone. "Send in the remaining Marines," I said to Lux. I could see the outline of the smoke slowly disappearing. "Don't take any survivors. Kill them before they can inform you of their surrender," I told Lux. "Yes, my lord." He saluted before turning to his officers. I turned on my comms. "John, Rob, and Alexander, wait for me. We're going to spectate the Jedi versus Sith battle," I said as I began walking. The battle was essentially over. 3,000 Marines flew into the chaos, completely shutting down any belief of resistance. The Nymodian Royal Guard's defensive positions were gone, so they could not resist the Marines crashing into them. As I reached the battle, the last one of them was killed. Only bodies remained now. Chapter 45. The End of the Naboo Conflict. As I headed through the bodies, I was met with 15 Marines standing guard at the power reactor door, and 50 standing inside, To defend if any of them got through and were hiding in the power generators.
"Where are the Jedi?" asked Alexander as we stepped up to them.
He had joined me once I reached the battle.
"Your Grace."
"Lord Commandant," he said while saluting, "the Jedi ran through here 7 minutes ago, following the apparent Sith.
They've gone deep into the power reactor. Do you want us to pursue?" He continued.
"No, we'll deal with it,"
I said as I began walking. They all stepped aside and saluted me. Santo, John, Rob, and Alexander followed me. As we entered, I contacted Lux. "Scan the reactor for heat signals," I said. After a few seconds of silence, a response came.
"My lord, there are 3 heat signals in the trapdoors leading to a trash shaft, used to dispose of dangerous materials. According to precise reports, Kagan is engaging him in single combat while Obi-Wan is still in the entrance,"
he said. "Try to get that entrance hacked and open it."
I said, "I hope Obi-Wan doesn't kill him before we arrive. I want my men to gain a bit of Sith experience. Many would say that it's a waste of time to come here to learn how to fight a Sith, but when you think about it,
it's quite important. Asajj Ventress, Count Dooku, and Grievous."
These 3 names were a terrifying presence in the earlier times of the Clone Wars. Anyone not on the High Council was essentially cannon fodder to them. But as the Clone Wars progressed, Ahsoka, Barriss, and other Jedi managed to fight them to a standstill.
Why is that?
Because they got experience. The Jedi hadn't fought the Sith for 5,000 years. But as they relearned how to fight them, Ventress and Grievous became less of a danger. Grievous became the usual commander and was priced as such.
I mean, his ass was beat by Obi-Wan with a blaster. Asajj Ventress was countered by Ahsoka, a youngling. Essentially, I believe the experience was the only true way to become immune to the Sith. If Alexander, John, and Rob can fight Maul to a standstill, then Ventress wouldn't be much of a problem. Because the Sith are different from that of the Jedi, the Sith empower themselves by emotion, meaning they do not make tactical sound moves, they make reckless, hard, and dangerous moves. This is why there's never been developed a sound strategy to defeat the Sith. They're completely unpredictable. But by fighting Maul they'd get some experience regarding this unpredictability. Maul with his double lightsaber was one of the more unpredictable Sith. Additionally, I would be a fool to not think Sidious wouldn't send Ventress after me if I got in the way of his plans, so I needed John, Rob, and Alexander to be able to somewhat fight a Sith. But enough of that. We were currently running through the bridges connecting the power reactor.
We headed past the reactor itself, down a few bridges, and we arrived at the entrance, just in time to barely make the outline of Kagan falling.
"Lux, can you get these doors opened?" I exclaimed into my comms.
"Almost got it,"
he responded.
We went silent as we could hear the outlines of lightsaber combat.
"Got it,"
he exclaimed after 10 seconds, and the doors shut down. As the doors opened, 2 droids swung down from the top of the roof and towards us, mainly me and Santo. I barely managed to sidestep it. Meanwhile, Santo just let him hit him, before grabbing his feet and throwing the droid back onto the bridge.
"Alexander, John, and Rob, go. We'll handle this," I said as I turned to the droids.
They were obviously hesitant, remembering what happened last time, but reluctantly left. Looking at the droids, I could see that they had been retrofitted. They suffered a bit of damage during the last battle, and lost a lot of their guns, but they had been equipped with new upgrades and weapons. I aimed my ARC 9965 and began shooting the droid in front of me, while flying backward, toward one of the bridges. The first 2 shots were dodged, but as I flew backward I hit him in the uppermost right chest, but he didn't even falter and continued on. I flew to a small reactor platform, not connected by a bridge close to us, forcing the droid to run around to get to the correct platform. While he was doing that I was shooting like my life depended on it. I hit multiple shots, but none of them seemed to do any damage, except the one that hit his sniper. He likely planned to use it, but now it's gone. He took out 2 E5 blaster rifles and began firing while running. I was forced to dodge around the reactor I stood on, which forced him to cease fire. He knew that if he hit that reactor it would cancel out any power-driven equipment, it would cause this place to fall together and he would die and Maul. As he approached I continued to fire with my ARC 9965, but as he entered the correct bridge I strapped it to my back. I then took out my commando pistols and flew forward. The ARC 9965 was meant for long medium-range combat and accuracy, but that wouldn't hold while flying in a zigzag pattern. I unleashed continuous fire as I flew straight towards the droid. He of course dodged them all, but as I got close, I turned my body upwards, which would make me fly over him harmlessly, but of course he wouldn't have that. And he jumped straight upwards and began spinning his leg to gain momentum. If I got hit that would knock me out cold. As I flew forward, I barely managed to put my right gun in my holster and take something out of my belt. As I reached the 1 meter mark, his feet were right in front of me. That's when changed my trajectory once again, going straight up, halting my forward momentum. The droid looked as I avoided his feet. He had jumped precisely to meet my previous angle, but not the new one. But instead of flying upwards, I cut the power. I flew down until I was horizontal to the droid. He had stopped his feet to catch himself when he landed. He didn't expect me to follow through. That's when I stretched my right arm out and connected something to the droid's chest. He of course realized it was there, but it was too late. Way too late. He looked down, just in time to see a thermal detonator. "Bye-bye," I said as I put both my feet between us and pushed myself away, and started my jetpack. However,
He flew straight down and missed the bridge. As he flew straight down into the black pit, the thermal detonator exploded, separating all his body parts from each other.
This was the plan I devised while in bed. The droids were perfect for single combat and ranged combat, but they did not have the brain of a tactical droid. They were fighters, not thinkers.
So he would obviously jump to stop me, so it worked out. I turned to Santo, just in time for him to throw his droids into the black void. He then roared in victory. RHHHHHHHHHH. He didn't even say anything, he just roared. All right, let's go help the others, I shouted as I activated my jetpack. Santo defeated his opponent at the entrance while I was far away. He ran through the corridor, not needing to bother about the shields. We exited at about the same time. Just time to see Obi-Wan fall into the pit from a force push by Maul. However, Alexander, John and Rob had already been fighting him and they quickly engaged him. Alexander took point, serving as the main attacker, while John and Rob cautiously moved around Maul, unleashing attacks when he didn't expect it. Santo, help Obi-Wan up, I said, and he ran to the pit. Meanwhile, I turned to Kagan. He had been stabbed in the same spot as in the original, and he was dying. Fast. I went to him and crouched beside him. And he started speaking. Tell Obi-Wan that, as my last wish, he must train Anakin to be a Padawan. He said, trying to lean upwards. But as he finished that, he laid down. To die.
It seems that in the original he held on to life to tell Obi-Wan this. But now that I was here to transfer the wish, he could finally die peacefully.
Although he wouldn't quite die, he would always be there.
I turned around to see that Alexander was faltering and all three of them had switched from the usual tactic to all of them attacking at the same time. It worked for a bit until Maul got used to it and pushed them back. At the same time, Santo got Obi-Wan up from the pit and he joined the battle. Alexander, John, and Rob stepped back and fell into the usual routine as Obi-Wan unleashed fury with his own and Kagan's lightsabers. The occasional shocks and attempts to kill with electrified blades coming from the Force staff seemed to be too much for Maul, and after holding out for 3 minutes, he finally faltered and made a mistake. He overreached his attack, allowing Obi-Wan to sidestep it, then slash straight through his stomach, splitting it into two. He then fell into the pit while screaming. I could see that Alexander moved to reach for the upper part when he died, but he looked at me slightly and I shook my head. Luckily, Obi-Wan didn't notice it due to him running over to Kagan before crouching down and feeling his pulse. He died 4 minutes ago, I said as I stepped up to Obi-Wan. Did he have any last words? Obi-Wan asked stoically, but I could hear the sorrow in his voice. He wanted you to train Anakin, he told me to pass it on, I said, and a conflicted face appeared on Obi-Wan's face. He now had the decision to anger the council or abandon his master's last wish. However, Obi-Wan quickly got over it and a determined expression entered his face. Thank you for passing my master's last wishes, Count Veridian, he said. It was my duty, I simply said. But we should get a move on. Queen Amidala is entering the city in a few minutes, I said, and he stood up, carrying Kagan's body in a princess carry. However, as Obi-Wan left, I saw the hilt of Maul's lightsaber. I quickly turned to Alexander. Pick that up and keep it hidden, I whispered while pointing at the lightsaber. He didn't respond but simply picked it up and placed it under his armor. And with that, we walked in silence to the hangar. While we were walking, I contacted Colonel Lux, ordering him to bring us an LAAT. We would need transport to the palace, and to find something that would allow us to preserve Kagan's body. Once we reached the LAAT, Obi-Wan didn't hesitate to call the Jedi Council, informing them of recent events. As we reached the palace, I could see a new class shuttle had already parked there, likely belonging to Padme. Chapter 46, Leaving Naboo. As we were walking towards the palace's council meeting room, I began thinking of what would happen next. It won't come as a shock for the Nimodians to accuse us of building illegal ships once the case against them fully starts. Honestly, I'd be more shocked and terrified if they don't, because that would mean Palpatine has a plan for me. However, once the Trade Federation does, I'll have a plan for them. I've gotten the support of Palpatine's personal connections, the war faction, and a few of my own personal ones. However, I do not believe that'd be enough. I still need a reason for my military expansion, so that even if I don't get any consequences, I can still operate them. So essentially, I'd need to gain the same possibilities as the Corporate Alliance, Intergalactic Banking Clan, the Trade Federation, and Techno Union. All these have large standing armies and navies, and they work completely separately from those of the normal planets. The Trade Federation, for example, has a larger standing navy than the judicial forces itself. Well, we'll get to that when the time comes. Now, we have to tell Anakin that Kagan is dead. Due to the fact we didn't need to send Naboo pilots into space to fight off a single Looker Hulk, and that we had a safe camp, Anakin was ordered to stay in the camp by Kagan. I didn't know as I had nothing to do with it. But apparently, he came back alongside Amidala once the battle was over. As we walked to the meeting room, I engaged in some small talk. So, you're taking Anakin as your Padawan? I asked Obi-Wan. Yes, he's got the potential and Kagan saw something in him. I'm sure he'll do great things as a Jedi. Obi-Wan said with a smile. It seems he's already preparing himself for the role of master. That's great. Well, if you ever need any help, just tell me. If you want Anakin to train with my soldiers, if you need help on a mission, I'd gladly help.
You're a great Jedi, Obi-Wan, and I'm sure you'll become a strong one in the future. I said with a smile. I had become good friends with Obi-Wan during this mission, although he is like 9 years older.
He was 25 and I was 16, but we both acted as though we were the same age, the perk of being like 37 years old mentally.
I appreciate that, Count Thalron.
I'll make sure to take you up on that later,
he said, just as we entered the council room. In the room, Padme sat in her usual queen chair.
The droid control panel had been removed and taken to the corner of the room. Around her sat all the counselors, and in the middle stood Viceroy Gunray with 4 of my royal guards.
Quarsh stood also at her side, while Tyr, Jaime, and Thorn stood around as well. And lastly, the Gun-Gon boss sat across from Padme but at the end of the circle. Greetings,
I said as I entered the room, and I could see Padme get relieved. I guess she knew of my adventures into the heat of battle.
Greetings, Count Veridian, Bibble said as he stood up and bowed. We gratefully appreciate everything you've done for us. We cannot possibly repay this debt, but fear not that we, the royal government of Naboo, shall not forget this and will wholeheartedly support you in any endeavor you require,
he said, as all the other councilmen and women stood up and did the same. Even Padme and the Gun-Gon boss ended up doing the same. I could not sit and let the Trade Federation do as they please. Thyferra had the same problems with corporations, and I could not stand this unlawful invasion of your great planet,
I said as I too bowed. And with that, the pressure lightened and we began talking. What Mesa do with these bunkers? Boss Nass asked.
I suggest we burn them, maybe let the people watch and burn it themselves, to let out the fury they had with these droids.
Bibble said he understood the people better than anyone, having studied them at school, and knew it was human nature to get revenge and they needed someone to vent their anger to. With all due respect, the droid army is not something we can just burn. I request your permission to take these droids for myself. We will study them and perhaps come up with ways to hack or shut them down externally, I said, and Quarsh nodded. I agree with Count Veridian. These droids have extensive programming and with Thyferra's resources and money they could slice these droids and come up with countermeasures, he said. Very well. Ownership of the droid remain shall be transferred to you, Boss Nass. You wouldn't mind helping Count Veridian transfer them to his ships? Queen Amidala said and asked at the same time.
Oh no, Mesa, no mind,
he said, before beginning to shake his head furiously, releasing spit everywhere. Now, what about the droid ship remains over the planet? Asked Quarsh. These remains can be sold to the Trade Federation or any other for great prices. The ship parts are expensive and they can help manually boost back our economy, the Minister of Economy said. I agree with the minister, however. I suggest you use them for military expansion. You've seen what happens if you do not have a military. I suggest you form a single military unit that isn't split by human and Gun-Gon race, but together, I said, and a puzzled look entered all their faces, especially Boss Nass. That would be a great idea, and with the spare parts we could create more ships, perhaps even capital ships, Quarsh said excitedly. It was in the nature of all military officers to want to expand. The Gungans are great close combat fighters, but they lack in range. But your Naboo soldiers can make up for that. Additionally, I'll leave the E5 blaster rifles. These can be used to equip your Gungans, Boss Nass. The E5 are fine weapons, easy to produce, and easy to use, I said. Well, Boss Nass, we the Naboo government agree with this proposal, and we will put it forth if you agree, Padme said as she stood up, walked to Boss Nass, and stretched her hand out, waiting for him to take it. Mesa think, Issa sound like grand plan, he said, first a bit silent, but the last part came out as a shout as he stood up and shook Padme's hand. Then they began discussing the future army they would create. They often turned to me, Tyr, and Jaime, asking for our advice. I had experience in funding and the connection between the army and the navy, while Tyr and Jaime were experts in their own fields. Soon, enough a few minutes turned into an hour, and an hour turned into 3. And that's when it ended.
Count Thalron, what will you be doing now?
Padme asked. We stole 2 Looker-Hulks. I'll go visit them, and equip it with the troops. I'll then head back and prepare my defense against the Trade Federation, I said, and Padme looked outraged. Defense? Why would you need a defense? She exclaimed.
Sadly, the valiant, munificent, and gladiators all go past the restrictions of the Ruzan Reformation. The Trade Federation will without a doubt attempt to drag us down, either for the drowning man to drown another or to show that helping a force attacked by the Trade Federation won't work, I said, and they all slowly understood. I'll have Senator Palpatine gather all our supporters. We'll use the last of our political power if we can. He's not become Chancellor, and if he does he will still support you, Bibble said. It was obvious he thought less of Palpatine for staying on Coruscant instead of coming home, so Bibble wanted Palpatine to do something as well. Thank you, Governor Bibble. I'll be taking my leave now. If you require any further advice, just call me, I said as I did a slight formal bow before turning around and leaving. General Tyr, Lord Commandant Alexander, Commander Thorn, and Admiral Jaime followed me.
As we left I could hear Padme say the meeting was over. She then ran after me. I could hear her footsteps before shouting, Count Thalron, please wait. She shouted as she walked fast towards me. Head ahead, and I'll meet you at the shuttle. Order the fleet to set course for Inuseiji, I said as I stopped. The other followed ahead, but John and Rob waited from a distance away. She walked up to me and closed the distance between our faces. I could feel her breath and smell the perfume. It was a strawberry smell. I tried to speak, but before I could she gave me a small peck on my chin. I was completely bewildered. I didn't think she had it in her. She's 14 after all. Thank you, Thalron.
The entirety of Naboo owes you, and so do I,
she said. After getting out of my shock, I got a slight blush on my face but it quickly disappeared. It was no problem, Padme. I hope to see you soon, I said as I began walking away. I could feel her eyes on me as I walked away.
As I approached John and Rob I could hear their chuckle.
Seems you finally got yourself your first kiss, John said, struggling to not begin all out laughing.
Oh, shut up, John. I doubt you even have had one yet,
I said, and with that, Rob burst out laughing while John shut up. I've kissed someone, he said silently as we walked, making Rob laugh even more. Obi-Wan never really participated in the talks. He announced Maul and Qui-Gon Jinn's death. Then he left to talk with Anakin. As we reached the shuttle, it flew us into space and towards the Valiant. As we were flying, Jamie began talking. What should we do with the Looker Hulks?
We do not even have close to enough men to man those two.
Just the command center. It's required 130 organics. Maintenance would require 3,200 droids, but about 6,400 organic ones. And the general crew comes out to 20,000 droids or 40,000 organics. As each position needs 2 crews, or for every 3 people there'd be 1 in reserve. Jamie said. Precisely, that's why we'll use the droids, I said, shocking them all. What? We'll use the Trade Federation droids? They might have a safe switch for them, and even worse, all the droids they have are shit. They suck at shooting, fixing everything, Jamie exclaimed. He was right, the droids of the Trade Federation were made to be cheap, and using these droids would be dangerous. They could have a safe switch or anything. Yes, but the Looker Hulks won't serve in a battle purpose. They'll be our fighter and troop carriers. They'll be in the back of the formation and won't suffer damages, I said. Jamie somewhat understood, but it was still stupid. But Your Grace, the Trade Federation built these droids. They can be hacked. We can't use the droids without having made extreme precautions, Jamie said. I agree, which is why we'll use them now, then land them on Pendrillion, and transfer our cyber experts there. We'll perform experiments and develop our own code, I said, and he reluctantly nodded.
General Tyr, make sure to have a majority of our troops on those Looker Hulks, and have them be prepared for battle at all times and cautious, in case the Trade Federation attempts anything,
I said. Yes, my lord.
Consider it done,
he replied.
Good. Now, Alexander, have the majority of the Royal Guards be with Viceroy Gunray. We'll have him as a hostage so that the Trade Federation does not attempt anything, I said, and he responded with a yes, my lord.
And with that, the shuttle entered the Valiant hangar and our conversation stopped. Chapter 47, Battle in the Senate. And like that, 6 months had passed since the Battle of Naboo. There had been a lot of controversy over the battle, but one fact remained certain. The Trade Federation had suffered an immense blow. He was physically and mentally tortured by the Thyferran government before he was transferred over to the judicial forces. Reports said that he had lost all his confidence and that he was troubled by daily nightmares. However, at the same time it seemed like he had grown. No more was the dumb and power-hungry Neimoidian. Now there was one cautious and more listening viceroy. Many may see this as an improvement, but one would know it is not. Viceroy Gunray is now a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode. And if you were so unlucky to find yourself as the guard of Viceroy Gunray, your nights would be terrified by screams from his chambers, and the eventual termination the guards receive. However, he didn't only receive torture from Count Thalron and his government. His daily work included a lot of headaches. After the Naboo crisis, more and more planets rebelled against their regime. However, Gunray didn't believe there weren't any forces behind this. Holy shit, a lot had happened during these 6 months. Firstly, I had stolen Maul's ship, yay. I had like 80 engineers and hackers working on it to ensure there were no bombs. They found like 6 of them, but they've all been defused. But they're still checking it. Alexander won't let me fly it yet. Secondly, I decided to cause some trauma on Mr. Viceroy. He suffered like 4 months with our most experienced mental torturers. He was sent alone in the forest, alone in a white room for 3 months. A lot happened to him, and now he's being mentally challenged. I wonder if Palpatine will replace him or not. However, we had also waged a secret war against the Trade Federation. I had funded uprising on all prominent Trade Federation planets, Kashyyyk, Kelix, Akiva. All these are examples of Trade Federation planets where they attempt to get control, but I have been sending billions of credits every year to ensure that the Trade Federations have a few problems. The 3 aforementioned planets have actually defeated the Trade Federation presence there, and they can't afford to send assistance. The fleet at Naboo was known as the Trade Federation Reserve Fleet, but now that it's gone, each planet has to rely on their local Trade Federation forces. Due to this, the Trade Federation has met a few months without any profit, barely scraping by. I had also decided against attending the Naboo celebration. I had nothing to do there. Sure, I could meet Palpatine and offer my congratulations, but honestly I'd rather go home and oversee the procurement of the Looker Hulks. We now had officially gotten a ship designed for troop transport. Plus I also wanted to use a few of the droids like the destroyers. They were just heavily underappreciated. They were a pain in the ass for the Jedi during the Clone Wars. Sure, a clone with a rocket launcher could take it, but Jedi didn't carry rocket launchers and they couldn't use the Force on them due to there always being 2 destroyers together. That was what I needed, especially when the Senate hearing ends today. After 4 long months of political battle, It is reaching its end. And I am fairly confident in our win, and at least survival. Worst case scenario, and I'll just hide the ships.
Walking through the Senate corridors was my team. It included Prime Minister Jason, Admiral Jamie, Lord Commandant Alexander and Representative Davis. As we reached our pod, I could see multiple senators giving me nods of encouragement.
This is it, my lord, Davis said as I sat down. Jason sat down beside me. Indeed, unless the Trade Federation somehow manages to gain the majority.
I said, though I doubted they wouldn't enter deficit just to cause problems to me. Their main cause of this meeting is us using ships in direct violation of the Russian Reformation. But now, without any noticeable economical surplus, I doubt they'd have enough to bribe even 10% without entering deficit, which they likely wouldn't do. If Palpatine, Vosatel and the Core World faction keeps their words, then we should win easily,
Davis said with a smile.
And he was right to be happy and confident. 2 days ago we had managed to get Bale Antilles and the Core faction to support us, mainly because we were fighting the corporations and the Core really didn't appreciate the corporations getting more power than us. Just then I heard a sound coming from the middle, and up rose Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. He had won by a large margin due to the support of the corporations and peace faction, plus my own personal one. Honorable delegates of the Senate, today we have come to ascertain the validity of the Trade Federation's accuses against the royal government of Thyferra, and if we shall take actions.
Palpatine said as his pod reached the top. The chair recognizes Senator Lot. From the Trade Federation. Mos Amadus said as Lot. Went forward on his pod.
Dear Senators, the Trade Federation has come in front of you once again, to inform you of the amassing military power known as Thyferra, led by a devious count named Thalron Veridian. He broke all rules of prisoners once he tortured our dear Viceroy for 4 months straight until the judicial forces got their hands on him.
He said, before continuing on.
Reports state that Count Thalron and specifically House Veridian is in ownership of one newly designed Valiant-class Star Destroyer, designed by his own designers and created by Quat Drive Yards. It is a monstrosity with 1,600 meters in length and 22 dBY, 827 heavy turbolasers, one of the strongest turbolasers to exist.
He said as the picture of my Valiant showed.
He is also in control of 5 munificent-class star frigates, without proper permission from the Senate, which the Banking Clan and the Trade Federation have, and lastly 2 newly designed Gladiator-class Star Destroyer, a total of 600 meters in length and 40 war-designed weapons. All of these goes against the Russian Reformation, and is a direct insult to the Republic.
He said. Meanwhile I looked at Davis, signaling for him to ask permission to step forward. But before he could, Lot.'s corporation buddies stepped forward. Senator Toonbuk Tura stepped forward as well. He was from the Commerce Guild.
We agree with the Honorable Delegate of the Trade Federation, he exclaimed, putting his hands into the air.
Then Senator Pascal Arganti of the Corporate Alliance did so too. We too agree. This is a direct insult to the peacekeeping ways of the Russian Reformation.
The chair does not recognize Senator Toonbuk Tura of the Commerce Guild, nor Senator Pascal Arganti of the Corporate Alliance.
Vice-Chancellor Mos Amadus shouted, and due to Palpatine's relative strength they did so. The chair welcomes the delegates of Thyferra to speak. Mos Amadus continued, as our pod flew forward.
We, the Thyferran government, recognize these accusations and understand the requirements of the Russian Reformations, but exceptions have been made before and are currently taking place. For example, the Looker Hulks used by the Trade Federation are larger than any of our ships, and they have hundreds of Looker Hulks. The Intergalactic Banking Clan also uses the specific model of one of our ships.
Davis said. He also signaled for me to take his place. I would talk from now on.
Yes, but we have made such votes here in the Senate, and we have unanimously decided that for the security of the trade goods from all planets, a security force had to be established. While the Intergalactic Banking Clan are transporting heavy treasures of Republic credits and they must be protected.
Lot. Said.
It may be true that you require security forces, but you've heavily abused said deal. You were allowed to build a fleet to protect against pirates and blockade planets if required, but you've built a fleet larger than the judicial forces. Your Looker Hulks have no defenses against small pirate ship, but against large vessels. Your ships are not built for pirates but to fight wars.
I shouted, while showing a picture of the massive vessel known as a Looker Hulk. You do not have the right to accuse us of abuse.
Our ships have never been raided before you destroyed a large portion of our fleet, and if you so wish, removing our ships will only infuriate planets when their food and water is destroyed.
Lot. Said emotionally, but I knew he had no emotions relevant to this topic.
I see, then we, the Veridian Medtech Corporation, wish to enter the same deal.
I said, and this time both the corporations but everyone else was shocked, including Palpatine.
But the ships are under the Thyferran government?
Palpatine asked with a slight narrow of his eyes. Incorrect, the entire Bacta industry has been transferred to House Veridian. We funded these ships and they are legitimately under us. And we are the only producer of Bacta, and Bacta is the most important medical substance to exist, correct? I asked to nobody specifically.
And therefore we require a fleet to protect this medical substance, which the ships mentioned by the Trade Federation will fulfill.
I said finally, and this time not even Lot. Knew what to do. This also won over a lot of undecided senators, as I was correct.
Bacta was the life-saving substance all planets needed, much more important than the things the Trade Federation transports, and more valuable. So you wish to enter a deal whereas you're allowed to bypass the Russian Reformation, and in return you protect the medical substance known as Bacta and you take responsibility for the journey through the galaxy?
Palpatine asked, Basically, I was now responsible for the transport of Bacta. Meaning if a pirate attacked a shipment to a planet, I would need to refund said people.
Yes, Supreme Chancellor,
I said, and he smiled. Very good, those who wish may now vote. The delegates may still appeal to you until the last person has decided to vote or not. Palpatine said as I went up to my disk and pressed the green button, voting to allow my proposal. Hundreds of senators stood up and did the same as a hologram appeared above Palpatine's pod, showing the votes. Yes, Y 31%. No, N 35%. Undecided, U 34%.
Y 45%.
N 48%. U 7%.
My lord, you have to make another promise, or we'll lose.
Davis said and I nodded. It had now been 5 minutes and only 6% hadn't decided.
Dear delegates, I have decided to come forward with another proposal. To ensure your trust in my fleet not being assigned anything but missions to ensure the prosperity of the Republic, we offer our fleet to ensure the security of the 20th sector, also known as the Topani Over sector.
I said, once again shocking everyone. After 30 seconds of silence Palpatine spoke. So, Count Thalron, your fleet will assist the judicial 20th sector fleet in ensuring the security of the 20th sector, including mercenaries, pirates and terrorists. Palpatine asked, this was big. My fleet could make the Topani Over sector the most secure one, and Palpatine knew this. And he would have gotten a lot of appreciation from that sector if their pirates disappeared and crime lowered. Immediately after, the remaining 6% require went to me.
Y 51%.
N 49%. The hologram said, and I leaned back in my chair. Finally, we were done with the good fucking riddance named the Trade Federation, and I'm sure as fuck going to ensure them having a hard time these next 14 years of their existence.
Well, time to lay back and enjoy the next 9.5 years without any major conflict I needed to care about. I just needed to watch my military and economy slowly building up.
I wonder if I should enslave a few other alien species to make other medical products. And I need an economy expert to lead said corporation. Well, only time will tell. Chapter 48. 10-year time skip. The Galactic Republic Territory, capital planet of Coruscant, upper level, the Senate quarters, 22nd hangar. On that same hangar, a crowd of around 50 people stood, waiting. On the outskirts of the crowded body, there was a man with macro binoculars. 50 meters. 25 meters. 10 meters. He counted down, until at last at 9 meters, the expected object appeared. It was a Nubian yacht followed by 2 N-1 starfighters. As the ship landed, the 2 pilots of the N-1 approached each other and began talking. Meanwhile, another crowded body was exiting the Nubian yacht. This was the body known as Senator Amidala and her team of escorts and advisors. However, they weren't all that to be correct. In fact, Senator Amidala herself was not in that crowded body. Senator Amidala, also previously known as Queen Naberi Amidala, is one of the most fiercest and determined women that the planet of Naboo has hosted and grown. She is known as ruthless to her enemies, brave, and does not back down from getting physical to ensure her safety. But meanwhile, she is forgiving and friendly. She strives to make everyone happy and gather friends, while also giving second chances. This has led her to become one of the more prominent members of the Peace Faction, currently led by Mon Mothma. However, the Peace Faction had been having a hard time. Previously led by Senator Palpatine, now officially known as Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, he had created his own faction, known as the Unity Coalition or the Loyalist Faction. However, Mon Mothma had worked hard, recruiting prominent senators with correct motives such as Anaconda Farr and Padme Amidala, alongside allying with the leader of the core faction, Senator Bail Organa, taking over from his predecessor. However, the main struggle of Mon Mothma was not Palpatine's recruiting, but simpler. The growing separatist movement. The Peace Faction always prospered by relying on outer and distant rim worlds, as they had witnessed the most war and dreamed of peace. But this newly growing separatist faction was poaching all her members, promising security, enforced by the Banking Clan, Trade Federation and Corporate Alliance, technology from the Techno Union, cheat loans from the Banking Clan and trade routes from the Trade Federation. No faction, organization, or even a republic could give such bonuses, the only ones being able to compare in totality being Thyferra, with their massive Bacta resources. Everyone wants them at cheap prices. However, the separatist faction wasn't the only thing growing. A new faction had risen through the ranks of the previous war faction, with almost the entirety of its old core members gone. There was one specific man who had become a shining beacon in the war faction's dark times. Senator Thalron Veridian. Using his control over the Topani Over sector, now known as the Veridian sector, and his extreme military might he had forged not only a totally new war faction, but a military alliance, involving all core members of said faction and some general members as well. Notable members of this alliance were, of course, Thyferra, but also Bestine, a prominent agriculture planet, previously owned and controlled by the Ariadu Outer Fleet, but with Thalron's control of this sector they were sent away. Bestine could now feed the entirety of the Veridian sector. Another important one was Fonder, previously designed to be a pit stop through the Ariadu Lamite or route, which had now been changed to the Veridian Medtech primary shipyards. Thalron had also made a deal with Tarkin, promising his ship security and safe passage through his sector, to which Tarkin had agreed as he would be given twice the number of lost transports if found defeated, kidnapped, or destroyed in his sector. And lastly, Talon. Although not much is known about the eventual agreement between Thyferra and Talon, one thing remained certain. It wasn't peaceful. Talon looked down on Thyferra due to their initial small population, while the Thyferrans looked down on the hordes of alien species. However, that was not something only found in Thyferra. Almost every human was afraid of non-humanoid species, and most of them were found on Talon. But what is known is that the galaxy lost contact with Talon, before it was eventually resumed and joined the Veridian military alliance, and even shockingly announcing themselves as vassals of House Veridian. However, even shockingly House Veridian acknowledged them as proper vassals. Talon got a lord named Eric Tal, officially establishing House Tal, and being recognized as a viscount. A few months later other planets did the same as Talon and got a noticeably better economy, government, and everything. They previously lacked jobs and medical substances. The aliens find it hard to find work due to the majority of work givers being xenophic humans. But Thalron created large medical factories, hiring billions of aliens with proper advantages, some of them being small, perfect for precise movement and better work, and others for their physical strength. Not only that, they got a stationary fleet of 1 Imperator-class Star Destroyers, 2 Valiant-class Star Destroyers, 8 Munificent and 4 Gladiators, and 45 other small capital ships and support ships, serving as one of the strongest fleets to exist, only matched by the Trade Federation. In total, the Thyferran Navy had 3 fleets, the 1st Attack Fleet, 2nd Home Defense Fleet, and 3rd Sector Defense Fleet. The first fleet was composed of 2 Imperator-class Star Destroyers, 4 Valiant-class Star Destroyers, 8 Gladiator-class Star Destroyers, 5 Munificent-class Star Frigates, 20 Cumulus-class Corsairs, 40 DP-20S, 15 CR-90 Corvettes, and 75 Carrack-class Light Cruisers, the first fleet with the strength as an Imperial and Republic fleet. The second and third fleets were composed of 1 Imperator-class Star Destroyers, 2 Valiant-class Star Destroyers, 4 Gladiator-class Star Destroyers, 2 Munificent-class Star Frigates, 10 Cumulus-class Corsairs, 20 DP-20S, 15 CR-90 Corvettes and 35 Carrack-class Light Cruisers each. That leaves about 5 Carrack-class Light Cruisers and 5 CR-90 Corvettes to patrol our space routes, mainly random patrols. To state it simply, the Veridian sector was one of the strongest sectors in the galaxy, perhaps just behind the Coruscant and Outer Fleet sectors. Holy shit. A lot had happened. I thought as I looked at the ship slowly descending from the clouds. The attack of the clones is officially starting. But it's not like I didn't do anything. Not quite otherwise. Everything had been flourishing. Firstly, Bacta. The number of radix had reached 100 million, allowing them to usually create 6 billion liters every month, or about 6 billion. And a total of 720 billion fucking liters every single year. Although this is a rough amount and it can vary from 720 to 600 billion. Also, this method abuses the shit out of droids, having made droids that take the same form as the radix, allowing them to properly handle back to some places. However, we sold units of 300 liters, each unit costing 600 credits. Which, with a total of 720 billion liters, leads us to 2,400 million units or 1,440 billion, 1,440 billion credits. That is a shit ton of money, but when considering the grand scale of Bacta it's not surprising. Bacta is used to treat everything. Anything else is just like a temporary fix for those not rich enough. This leads me to the fact that even after buying all those companies and corporations, the other medtech areas only come out to a total of 160 billion in credits, so all in all we won about 1,600 billion credits, which is a lot. The 10% Republic tax comes out to 160 billion, the entirety of the rest of the medtech businesses. Now then, I'd also technically get the taxes from our vassal state. I do not consider Thyferran payment inside it, mostly due to it being so extremely low. We have about 20% tax, and that with healthcare, police support, and other daily needs, and with 20 million inhabitants it reaches barely 12 billion. And with all other money-making schemes such as business tax protection fee, and everything, our total income comes to 1,991 billion, 1,440 billion in Bacta, 160 billion in Veridian medtech, 20 billion in population tax, 180 billion in export and import fees, and lastly 191 billion in tourism and small trades. Now on to expenses. As said earlier, there goes 160 billion to the Republic, so we have 1,831 billion left after that. About 70% goes to government spending, which is increased now due to our large radius of control, which comes out to 1,281 billion 700 million, leaving us with 549 billion 300 million credits left. Military payment goes something like 4 billion 200 million for 350,000 soldiers, 5,665,360,000 for 472,030 naval crewmen, or 9,865,360,000 credits to pay the entire military that we currently own, which to be honest is extremely good. But right now, I put all the money left over into important projects such as a planetary shield generator, and holy shit those are fucking expensive to build. Taking a wild guess. A planetary shield generator to cover the entirety of Thyferra would cost approximately 3 trillion credits and it would take 5 years. Luckily we began ours 4.5 years ago, so we might be set by the time of the Clone Wars. But that shield generator also cost 100 billion credits to maintain every single year, with the plasma power required. Luckily we got a deal with Naboo, giving us plasma way below market value. I was also considering building one for my defensive outputs, but then I'd rather place it on Yagtool. Now, throughout these years I had spent hundreds of hours finding good advisors, commanders, economists, loyal followers and dedicated workers, and in the end, I found a few good ones. Firstly, the new CXO of MedTech Industries, a new and young Rush Clovis. He began working for me 9 years ago and he's already done wonders, starting new businesses, and sending competitors out of the market. I mainly chose Rush Clovis due to his loyalty to the banking clan, and if I could get that then I'd be happy. Additionally, he's a fine-ass banker and studied economy on Nymodia. It's mainly due to him that we've managed to buy out most medtech companies. However, sadly we haven't gotten to the Selkith yet, but we will soon. For my intelligence agency, I decided to be a complete dick and steal Admiral Yullerin. He's a young and intelligent man. Although he's getting older, he joined me in his late 20s and he's now in his later 30s, but he's grown my information network by a large margin. Officially known as the Veridian Intelligence Agency, or VIA for short. However, he's not the only one I stole. Trench. Yes, the Spider-Man with 6 arms. You can tell him how ugly he is or evil, but you cannot deny his capabilities. He fought for the corporate alliance for years, dreaming of reaching a high position and leading a grand fleet, making a name for himself. And he did, but then he died. At the Battle of Malastair Narrows, however, Yullerin tracked him down. He put his personal emotions aside and found him, and we offered him control of one of our fleets if he joined us and served for us. And he said yes after all. Trench's true nature was that of a predator, and he was the perfect attacker. This was why we gave him control of the first attack fleet, the one fleet making up half of our naval combat ability. But what made me confident nothing would happen was simple. Xenophobia. The humans growing up on Thyferra have grown up with hate against alien species, especially those who aren't humanoid. They're trained and disciplined enough to listen to Trench, but they would never sacrifice anything that goes against me for Trench, and it's simple. Because he's not human. Chapter 49. Meeting Padme. Now, on to the situation at hand. I had 50 guards with me, including John, Rob, Alexander, and Santo.
Santo had become well known within the entirety of the Royal Guards and in the mercenary world.
He had never let anything serious happen to me, and through his time as a mercenary, he had never lost a VIP. Rob and John had become known throughout the entire galaxy. They had become known as the Ivory Duo, due to their noble but still cheap fighting style, never betraying their payers and known for being capable of fighting Jedi.
The entirety of the Sovereign Guard had become elite. Through 10 years of repeated training in the ways of 4 staffs, the Sovereign Guards in itself had also expanded.
From a measly 200 to now over 2,000 agents throughout the galaxy. They serve the same role for Thyferra as the Jedi do for the Republic. They are spread throughout the Veridian sector and execute orders from their count. There's usually a company on every major planet in the Veridian sector, guarding the lords or governors of said planet, or enforcing security. The Royal Guards in itself had also met a gigantic increase in personnel, from 2,000 to 20,000. Their training, enforcement, and background checks were all designed and paid for by House Veridian. However, what made the Royal Guards unique was that they did not represent the planet of Thyferra, not even at all. The Royal Guards directly represented House Veridian, and me, Count Thalron. And House Veridian was a mercenary once, so we continued to do that. Our 20,000-man force went on multiple mercenary missions, keeping our battle experience high and casual. They had participated in battles such as the open-closed war after Obi-Wan asked for our help, the judicial forces not wanting to join, although he did say he might inform them of the Tabana gas if I said no, which I didn't. They also participated in multiple pirate raids with the local judicial fleet, small conflicts, and missions. My bounty hunter team had recently recruited Sugi, Rumi, and Seripa. I put them together with Embo, to form the team they had later, then Orasing, Bosk, Denga, and the newly arrived Kato Parasiti, the shape-shifting assassin. Another guy we had employed was Zek Pero. I barely remember his name from the comics, but I think he was meant to die by Maul, but somehow Maul didn't look him out in time and he was therefore recruited by us. Maybe Palpatine overworked Maul due to my arrival, and he didn't have the time to hunt him down. However, Zek Pero didn't work for us long. I hired him 2 weeks after the Battle of Naboo, to do one and one thing only. Alternate the original copy of the inhibitor chip. He was given the most advanced cloaking devices a man could buy, and we got him onto Kamino under a meteorite storm. There he took a copy of the inhibitor chip, and sent it to us, all while being on Kamino, hiding there for a week as we customized it, adding our own Order 66, but keeping theirs, eventually creating orders to kill Palpatine, and remove the total trust of Palpatine upon one order. We created multiple safe plans until we eventually replaced them with the original one. I half expected it to work, and half did not.
Like if they changed it at all, it would be spotted, unless the guy changing it is completely incompetent. But if it actually worked, then we would be able to kill Palpatine immediately, perhaps on Mustafar with his few clones or any other places. But back to the Royal Guards. My Royal Guards didn't only work for me or war. In fact, most senators in the Senate currently use one of my guards, whether it is the usual ones or even sovereign guards. This meant that I could easily kill off hundreds if not thousands of senators at once. Of course, that would be meaningless as everyone would know I was the one to order it. Beside me stood Senator Davis. Yes, Senator. After my control over the Topani Over sector, I was appointed the senator and ruler of said sector, representing them, while Davis took the job of representing the planet of Thyferra. And lastly, Rush Clovis took the secondary job of senator of the MedTech Corporation. He also had a representative, and so did I. Representatives were given to senators either fulfilling other duties in their day-to-day activities, often requiring them to be distant from the Senate and Coruscant, or if they had a sub-community on their planet or sector, demanding their own speaker. However, that is when Senator Amidala or whoever that is, took a step to walk off the ship and it exploded. The explosion originated from the underbelly of the ship,
focusing on the waiting area outside the main ship. Immediately after the explosion, without even waiting, I was thrown to the ground, and a safety formation was put in motion. A circle with Santo, Rob, John, and Alexander standing in the middle, everyone ready to block the laser shots. However, that's when I stood up. Alexander, get some men to help out Senator Amidala. If my eyes are not mistaken, the pilot might be her, but check the people involved in the explosion, I exclaimed as I slowly stood up. Alexander was used to my antics of not needing too much protection myself and therefore held back 16 of our best men, alongside him, Rob, John, and Santo, while the rest sprung into action, taking those alive out of the fire, checking up with the Queen, and eventually bringing Padme and Gregor Typho. I didn't meet her immediately but instead took her straight to one of my transports as we sat down. Another great landing, I hope? I asked the still-struck Padme. However, she recovered quickly. This wasn't the first time she was attacked. Your bad humor is not helping, she said stoically, although I could see a slight smile almost pop up. I do not quite know if this is the correct time, but I'll again give you the proposition of loaning a few of my sovereign guards. I do know you would wish privacy and Typho trusts only his men, but only a few of them, 4 to 5, to protect you against laser bolts, I said, and she began thinking. This wasn't the first time. Tens of attempts had been previously made to have Padme use the sovereign guards. She always rejected them, not wanting to rely on me too much, and Gerald Typho being the usual non-trusting guard captain. Senator, although I would usually advise you not to, we lost almost all of our veteran members. The only ones remaining are 16 newbies permanently stationed on Coruscant. You need more security, he said, although I could hear the sadness in his voice. Those were his best guards and those he knew the best. Fine, sure, Thalron. I'll take you up on your offer. You can have 5 of your guards join us, but they will be under Typho's command, she said, accepting the offer and adding some terms, although those were in the usual procedure when my guards did work for senators. Due to the Senate guards' corruption and lack of skills, not including the commandos, fewer had option to take the free Senate guards as they usually listened in and maybe spied on you, unless you were quite resourceful and strong that you had connections in the Senate guard. But that was great. Now maybe Anakin, those creatures wouldn't be on her body before Anakin jumped into her room. That's great to hear, Padme. However, I wouldn't be shocked if Palpatine got you some guards as well, as this assassination was way too close, I said, and Padme shook her head. Chancellor Palpatine believes in my ability to survive and trust Typho, she said. She truly cared a lot about Palpatine and looked up to him. Too bad he was the one who destroyed all that she stood for. I agree with Count Thalron, my lady. These assassination attempts have been too frequent and too dangerous. The Senate is likely to do something, as a successful assassination is a dangerous possibility, especially one in the Loyalist faction. Typho said he was correct. If someone assassinated a senator without being caught or punished, those who serve the wrong senators or other senators who want someone out of the picture would know that it is possible. It's the same principle as to why you don't just give kidnappers what they want, then others would be motivated to do the same. Padme nodded, taking in the advice of Typho much more seriously than I did. However, that might be due to me cautiously informing her of Palpatine's not-so-great side sometimes. With that we began small talk. She asked what I would do about the mining demonstrations they're having problems with. Spice miners on one of their planets. They've been extremely unhappy as of late. And as we reached the Senate quarters, we parted ways. A few unnamed Jedi were waiting on us, likely to take Padme's report on the situation. A detective was there as well, the Coruscant police force. After that, we too walked away, but we headed for our own quarters instead of joining Padme in explaining the events. Although the Jedi and the detective are pretty likely to come up later, after all, we were the only witnesses present at the explosion. But in all honesty, that shape-shifting assassin should never have gotten that job, and that cannot be debated. Firstly, why the fuckity-fuck would you explode a bomb when it's landed and they're walking out? That yacht does not have an escape pod, and the ship did not survive the explosion. If that was in space, then they'd have exploded guaranteed. Sure, you could argue that nobody died either way, but the fact remains that someone could have survived or anything, but it's still idiotic. Another problem is the fact that she sends the assassination droid back to her. Like, get rid of the droid. Drive it into a fire or something, not send it back. Sure, maybe she didn't know a Jedi was there, but she should have been watching, not standing behind a building 15 miles away. Maybe it was all meant for the sake of the film after all. I'm not 100% certain that this is precisely the same as the canon. A lot of things are different, including hyperdrive speed, time, and ways. Nor is it Legends, like my new thief. He's from the Legends and does not exist in the canons. However, I hope it goes mostly along the lines of the canon, but I seriously hope Anakin is a lesser jerk in this universe than in canon, because before I came here, I wanted to punch the shit out of him when I was watching it, and it will be so much worse if I see that shit now. But I'm gonna act my age and not do it because my age is kind of wild. Without thinking of it, I'm now 26 years old. Padme is 24 and Anakin is 18. Anakin is actually precisely 18 years older than me, and I don't want to even calculate my age if you consider my time on Earth, which is over 50, and I don't need to know. Well, the Clone Wars begins in a few weeks, maybe months. I should probably get a few more ships. Chapter 50. The Office Talks. In the most important room on Coruscant sat 9 individuals, one leading the largest government to exist, 7 members of the Jedi Order's High Council, and one Count Thalron, the leader of the Republic Military Alliance. I don't know how much longer I can hold off the vote, my friends. More and more star systems are joining the Separatist. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine spoke, in a sad voice.
I found myself sitting in the Chancellor's office, alongside 7 other Jedi. The reason I'm here is because I was recently appointed as Palpatine's military advisor. I was given the rank of Admiral within the Judicial Forces, although I rarely used it. Although I led the military faction within the Republic, I was still technically a part of the Loyalist faction. Such exceptions were made for many. Padme was mainly a peace faction advocate, but still a member of the Loyalist faction, same with Bail Organa and the Core faction. If they do break away Mace Windu began before being cut off. I will not let this Republic that has stood for 1,000 years be split in two. My negotiations will not fail,
Palpatine said proudly. If they do, you must realize there aren't enough Jedi to protect the Republic. We're keepers of the peace, not soldiers. Mace Windu said.
You are correct, but there does not exist a force currently capable of protecting the Republic against the Separatist forces,
I said, shocking the entire room. Nobody had truly bothered to research the CIS military. What do you mean, Count Thalron? Palpatine asked worriedly, although I doubt he really is. I leaned back into my seat and breathed in a big sigh. The Republic is quite simply weak. The Jedi too are weak, I said, and I could see Windu get a bit angry, but Yoda remained calm.
Weak you say Jedi is, explain you will.
Yoda said interestingly.
The Ruzan Reformation handicapped the Republic, the Jedi and the galaxy. The Ruzan Reformation created a golden age of piracy and corruption,
I said before taking a break.
The judicial forces are weaker than my own personal fleet. The Trade Federation has enough droids to take over the entire Outer Rim by force. Nobody can openly disobey their forces,
I said, and this time Palpatine spoke up.
The Trade Federation would not dare attack us, they'd lose all trade, Palpatine said, but I know he didn't truly believe that. Yes, but unlike the Republic and the Senate intelligence, my Veridian intelligence agency has information about the CIS forces, I said, though that was mostly bullshit, but some of it was correct. The Trade Federation, the Intergalactic Banking Clan, the Corporate Alliance, the Techno Union, the Commerce Guild, Hypercommunications Cartel, these make up the core of the corporate core, and they have precisely what it takes to wage a war,
I said as realization dawned upon the Jedi's faces.
The Trade Federation has the trade routes, the Intergalactic Clan has the money, the Corporate Alliance and the Commerce Guild own large territories and resources, the Techno Union has the technology and HCC has the communications. This group has the capability to create and maintain an army without the Republic, no matter how many sanctions you put on them,
I said, and the Jedi began thinking.
Yes, but they would not dare break away from the Republic. That would allow other corporations to take over Republic business,
Palpatine said. Correct, they can't break away, but they can do business.
The Banking Clan gives the CIS large loans at low interest rates if not none. The CIS can then buy resources, ships and technology from these corporations, making them rich as well. It is a win-win. If the CIS wins, then they will be indebted to the corporations,
giving them immense power, and they earn a lot of money, I said, and the Jedi was outraged.
We cannot allow this, we must deal the first strike,
Ki-Adi-Mundi exclaimed. I'm afraid that it is too late to do anything.
If Count Thalron speaks true, then they will be doing it completely legally, not allowing us to put sanctions. Additionally, the corporations hold immense political power. Any bills we put in motion can be shut down,
Palpatine said sadly.
Count Thalron, wisdom you have shown, a plan you have,
Yoda spoke silently.
The fact remains, unless we can magically build an army within a few months, then we're screwed. Dooku is not naive. He wants to break out and he knows he'll have to go to war for it. My only suggestion is that we contact Quat drive yards and build a lot of Venators,
I said again, and this time Pelo Koon spoke. He was the foremost military expert.
Why Venators? They possess little firepower compared to the Looker-Hulks and munificence that you suggest will be used against us.
It's simple. We cannot beat the corporations and CIS in numbers.
The Senate and the Republic have allowed a few corporations monopoly over their respective areas.
Our only shot at winning is through quality,
I said, and they began thinking. Count Thalron is correct. We cannot match their numbers. If we focus on starfighters, a single Venator could potentially match 4 to 5 munificence alone,
Palpatine said excitedly, happy that his plans were going forward.
True this is. But if negotiations goes as planned, come to war, we must not,
Yoda said slowly, putting us back on track.
Do you believe it will come to war, Master Yoda?
Palpatine said finally. The dark side clouds everything.
Impossible to see the future is, Yoda said finally, just in time for Palpatine's assistant to put up on his holo transmitter and inform him of the Loyalist Committee's arrival. Good, we must discuss this later,
Palpatine said as he stood up. The rest of the Jedi Council soon followed, but me and Mace Windu remained seated. What do you mean the Jedi are weak? He finally said quietly, only me hearing it. The current Jedi Order works for their intended assignment. But you and the rest of the Council must realize, times are changing.
Chaos is a fall for some, but a ladder for others. And the best time to climb is on a ladder, not without it,
I said, and he became silent. My suggestion is to add military command to your training.
I can loan you my men, and then when war comes, you will be prepared,
I said, and he began thinking.
You are certain this war will come?
Mace said as we both stood up. I can bet the entire planet of Thyferra on it.
The corporations have been idle long enough, it's in their nature to be greedy, and the Senate is corrupt. Change must come or more and more cess will come, even if we defeat all of them.
I said and Mace nodded, walking off. I then heard Padme speak. Do you have any idea of who was behind this attack? She asked and Mace spoke.
Our intelligence points to disgruntled spice miners on the moons of Naboo, Windu said as he walked towards the exit. As he reached Padme she spoke.
I think that Count Dooku was behind it.
He is a political idealist, not a murderer.
Mundi spoke. You know, milady, Count Dooku was once a Jedi. He couldn't assassinate anyone.
It's not in
his character. Mace Windu spoke.
True, Master Windu, but you cannot deny the coincidence of it happening right before the vote.
I said and Padme smiled a bit at me.
But for certain, Senator, in grave danger you are. Yoda said in his usual tone of speaking. Master Jedi, may I suggest the Senator be placed under the protection of your graces?
Palpatine said, while looking out the window, like a true leader. Do you really think that's a wise decision under these stressful times? Bail Organa spoke.
Chancellor, if I may comment, I do not believe Padme tried.
The situation is that serious? No, but I do, Senator. I realize all too well that additional security might be too disruptive for you, but perhaps someone you're familiar with. An old friend, like Master Kenobi.
He said at last, with a bit of sarcasm and smiles into that sentence.
That's possible. He's just returned from a border dispute on Anshan.
Mace Windu said, always knowing where everyone is.
Do it for me, milady. Please. Palpatine said lastly.
The thought of losing you is unbearable.
Palpatine spoke.
I will have Obi-Wan report to you immediately, my lady.
Windu said before turning around to leave.
Thank you, Master Windu. Amidala said as Palpatine walked back to his chair.
And with that we sat down and began discussing. What will we do about the separatist movement?
Bail Organa said as we all sat in the Palpatine's office. We have to begin negotiations to incorporate the separatists back into the Republic.
Padme said, being steadfast in diplomacy. True, but we still need a backup plan.
If they end up attacking, then we will be on the back foot.
I said. What do you mean, Count?
Orn Frite said, the fat monstrosity of Ryloth. He means that the Republic is not prepared for war, and the separatist might be. At least if they end up breaking out of the Republic.
Palpatine said.
The judicial forces can surely defeat whatever forces the separatist has.
Padme said in a determined voice.
As I and Count Thalron talked with the Jedi about, Veridian intelligence shows that the separatist leadership has taken out big loans from the intergalactic banking clan, and the core corporations have shown increased favorability towards them, meaning the separatists can likely loan or buy their corporate forces to their own military.
Palpatine said slowly.
And every one of them has a fleet capable of fighting judicial fleets, and the Trade Federation can likely beat the entire judicial Grand Fleet.
I said, and Orn Frita quickly got scared. What? We must do everything to ensure our safety.
He exclaimed, unhappy that he might not get to enjoy himself in the slaves and food of Coruscant.
And how do you suggest we do that, Senator Ta? I asked, happy to hear him fumble.
We must create a large fleet to combat them.
He said, happy with his response.
And break our own rules, I suppose? After all, you do remember the restrictions of the Ruzan Reformation.
I asked again, and he stopped speaking.
We could maybe call on the planetary defenses of loyal Republic planets? Bail Organa said. He led the core faction and multiple of them had somewhat large planetary defense fleets. I agree, the core, the colonies, and Inner Rim all hold planets that wield large planetary defense forces. You too, Count Thalron holds a large fleet, capable of going toe-to-toe with the Trade Federation. Padme spoke, she was all too confident in my fleet.
Although that was to be expected. She was saved by a single battlecruiser, and we currently hold 14 of them. Additionally, I've talked to her a lot about my fleet, both on the dates that we had done more often and also related to work. Although I hadn't entered a relationship with Padme, we often went to dinner and other occasions together, and I dare say we both enjoyed it. But I wonder how Anakin will react.
If that is the case, we'd also need an admiral for said united fleet?
Palpatine said while looking at me with a smile. I knew what he wanted. He wanted to please me.
Palpatine and I had actually gotten along quite perfectly. Of course, our talks were just a mask. Palpatine trying to manipulate me and I know of it. However, we actually agreed in a lot of cases, and I know he does too, as most of them represent him as emperor in the future. Mostly how peace cannot be held without a large military.
How appearance is also important, especially in the Outer Rim, where fear is what holds a population under control.
We also talked a lot about the need to balance out your fleet, so essentially, if he becomes emperor now, the Rebel Alliance might have more problems due to a few more support ships.
How about we make Count Thalron the supreme commander of the Republic? He asked, shocking the entire Loyalist Committee.
Thalron has a lot of experience, but I doubt the Navy and military will be happy with a senator and a planetary leader coming in and swooping command.
Bail said. And we do not have much of a military, only a peacekeeping force. Orn Frita said.
Supreme Chancellor, I am grateful for your trust in me, but I feel it will just be disadvantageous for me to be appointed now, in times of peace. Instead, I'd much more like to get the judicial fleet and army report so I can get used to their way of fighting forces and officers. And then if war breaks out I will gladly accept the position.
I said finally, and Palpatine smiled. I do not know if Palpatine wanted to get the military to hate me with this, but I think I played the correct move.
After 2 more hours, night crept in and we left. Although I followed Padme to her quarters, they were in a building. She had recently bought the upper part, and of course I had bought mine besides, but I actually bought mine before.
Soon I'll meet Anakin for the first time in 10 years. I might have said he's 36, but that's wrong. He's 26, Chapter 51. Crisis in Padme's room. Later that day I found myself inside Padme's room. I had joined her to discuss her opinion on the separatist issue.
Thalron, I do not believe it will come to war,
she said steadfastly. I began chuckling as I spoke. So you do not believe the separatist will resort to war, but you believe they attempted to assassinate you. War and assassination is 2 different principles. War means millions of deaths while assassinations is at most 4 to 5. You cannot compare those 2 against each other.
Padme said.
True, but the separatist will declare war on the Republic. Their entire propaganda motive is the fact that the Republic is corrupt and the Senate is wrong. How will they maintain their facade if they allow such a thing to exist? I said, and Padme shook her head. Their propaganda has the pure motive to discredit the Republic and the Senate. And the separatist will die out. They cannot maintain the Outer Rim without the support of the core. Padme said. I agree, you are correct. The Outer Rim does not have the means to survive alone. But the separatist wants to gain the core's support. But the core has endless of bonuses and support in the Senate. Few would ever leave. And as such their best chance is conquest. I said, and she had trouble refuting that. Surely there's other ways of the Outer Rim and the core to converse and live in harmony together. Padme spoke sadly. Naboo is a mid-rim planet, and they only hold a seat in the core Senate due to their plasma reserves and great diplomacy. The Naboyans are great diplomats naturally. There are, but the chances of that happening is low. The core thrive in their dominance
over the Outer Rim, some parts of the mid-rim and the expansion region. They'd never
voluntarily give up supremacy over the natural resources those worlds represent. I spoke and she nodded sadly. She understood all too well how corrupt and greedy the Senate was. Your Grace, Rob said as he stepped up to us.
Yes, Rob,
I responded. The downstairs guards inform us that the Jedi has arrived and are approaching. Rob said as Padme stood up from the sofa. So early?
Jar Jar, go meet them,
she said as she walked off to inform her maids and Typho. I sat in the sofa as I waited for the Jedi to arrive. Now I honestly hoped Anakin acted a bit better than he does in the movies. Hopefully it'll be a mix of the movies. Not properly telling the scene, and maybe he changed due to his mother being safe. Because I really, deeply hated Anakin in the early movies. He became extremely chill and nice in the later movie, but in the first 2 he was kind of annoying though. In the first movie he had the excuse of being 8. I saw Jar Jar move towards the elevator and I heard his exited voice 10 seconds later. Obi? Obi? I heard Jar Jar exclaimed as the swooshing sound of the elevator doors opening reached my ears.
Mesa so smilin' to see an Yusa, he exclaimed again as I could hear the voice of his feet gently hopping up and down.
Good to see you again, Jar Jar. The prompt reply of Obi-Wan Kenobi came. They then began walking to the main area. As they reached the entrance, Jar Jar spoke. Senator Padme, Count Thalron, Mesa Palos is here.
Luki. Dessen Jedi arriven,
Jar Jar said as he introduced the Jedi.
It's a great pleasure to see you both again, my lady, Count Thalron,
Obi-Wan said as he stepped forward and I stood up. Obi-Wan approached me first and we gave each other a proper handshake. He then did the same to Padme. Good to see you again, Obi-Wan, Anakin, I said as I nodded at Anakin. He nodded back with a smile.
It has been far too long, Master Kenobi,
Padme said as her eyes drifted towards Anakin.
Ani?
My goodness, you've grown, she said. And Anakin stepped forward. As he began talking, I wondered where his riz went. He had so great aura at 8 years old. And now it's gone. So have you grown more beautiful? I mean, Anakin said slowly, almost insulting her. I mean. For a senator, I mean. He said, stumbling even more. Padme clutched in with a chuckle and a laughter, relieving us of the tension growing, but then she made it worse. Ani, you'll always be that little boy I met on Tatooine, she said, and that's when I knew I had to change the subject. So you're 18 now, Anakin? How's training in the Force going? I said as we all begin sitting down. It's going great. I'm excelling in every area, he said proudly, not forgetting to brag. But then Obi-Wan got down to business. Our presence here will be invisible, my lady. I can assure you. Obi-Wan spoke up. I am Captain Typho of Her Majesty's Security Service. Queen Jamila has been informed of your assignment. He spoke before pausing. I am grateful for your arrival here, Master Kenobi.
The situation is more dangerous than the Senator admits,
he said. I do not need more security. I need answers. I want to know who's trying to kill me. Padme said, she as usual hated security but loved action. Don't know how those two mix. We are here to protect you, Senator.
Not to start an investigation.
Obi-Wan said, knocking down her wishes. We will find out who's trying to kill you, Padme. Anakin said, completely overstepping his authority and ability.
I promise you.
Anakin continues as Obi-Wan's neck whips towards him.
We will not exceed our mandate, my young Padawan learner.
Obi-Wan said, and their argument officially began.
I meant that in the interest of protection, the Senator.
He said, trying to justify his mishap. We will not go through this exercise again, Anakin. And you will pay attention to my lead. Obi-Wan said, clearly showing Anakin that he's in charge, but Anakin can't seem to take a hint.
Why?
Was Anakin's quick response. Obi-Wan didn't even think and automatically responded.
What?
Why do you think we were assigned to her if not to find the killer? Protection is a job. For local security. Not a Jedi.
It's overkill, Master. Investigation is implied in the mandate.
Anakin said.
We will do exactly as the Council has instructed.
Obi-Wan said, not leaving any doubt.
And you will learn your place, young one.
Obi-Wan finished, ending the argument.
Well, now that you two are done fussing over that, I'll inform you of my part in it.
I said, breaking the tension. Me and Padme are working on an important bill to the Senate, one whom will increase government spending in education. Therefore I'll be here the entire night. I have 13 guards with me and Padme has got 5 guards from my royal guards. I said as Alexander stepped forward alongside Korsh. The Naboo guards will remain in the control and ground floors, securing all entrances and exits. We number 17 in total. Korsh said.
I'll have 4 guards only the balcony, for guards at the elevator, 5 guards in the main area, and 5 guards with Padme and Count Thalron. Alexander said and the Jedi nodded. We'll join the 5 guard, but we'll stay outside the rooms as we can sense a lot in our surroundings.
Obi-Wan said. Sounds great.
Well, we better get to it. I said as me and Padme stood up and walked to her office, where we began the work on the new bill, which would force all Republic worlds to use a certain % of their total income on education. Soon enough time passed as Padme decided to go to sleep, though I waited a few more minutes working on a few extra details. As I left the office I heard, Lord Commandant Alexander and Captain Korsh has too many men stationed here and on the floors. It would be stupid to try it with force.
Obi-Wan said as he walked towards Anakin. Any activity up here? Obi-Wan asked as I approached the main room.
Quiet as a tomb.
I heard Anakin respond.
I don't like just waiting for something to happen to her.
Anakin said as Obi-Wan's machine began beeping.
What's going on?
Anakin asked again as I stepped into the chambers. I guess she covered the cameras?
I said amusingly as I stepped inside. Yes, she did. Obi-Wan said as he stepped towards the room.
What is she thinking? He mused. She programmed R2 to warn us if there are any intruders. Anakin said, almost like he thinks that makes a difference.
There are many other ways to kill a senator.
Obi-Wan said while sighing.
I know, but we also want to catch the assassin, don't we, Master?
Anakin said, almost proud of his decision to use her as bait.
You're using her as bait.
Obi-Wan said, a bit angrily. I doubt Anakin made that choice.
She quite like entering danger, although I do not know if it is on purpose.
I said and Anakin nodded, confirming my thoughts. It was her idea.
Don't worry. No harm will come to her. I can sense everything happening in that room.
Anakin said, although I don't know if he believed that himself.
But with the cockiness radiating off him he just might.
It's too risky. Besides,
your senses aren't that attuned, my young apprentice. Obi-Wan said as he looked towards the room. And yours are.
Anakin replied almost immediately.
Perhaps,
was Obi-Wan's curt response.
And with that I began walking towards the 4 guards outside the room, although my senses were not even close to that of Obi-Wan and Anakin.
If I stood right outside the door then it should still work quite all right. I could hear outlines of Obi-Wan and Anakin talking, until I sensed something. Something or someone was dropped onto the floor of Padme's room, and I knew what it was. Those creatures.
Prepare yourselves, I sense something.
I said as I took out my vibroblade.
I could sense the creatures slowly getting closer and closer to Padme until they entered her bed. 2 insects on her bed. I said out loud as the royal guards prepared to attack.
3, 2, 1, go. I counted down until I kicked the door open and ran in.
I saw one of the creatures were getting too close to comfort as I jumped onto it and sliced
it into 2.
However, I could sense that my guards were too slow and barely managed to shock the second
creature before it lunged at Padme.
However, that little shock stopped the creature just enough for me to grab Padme by her shoulders and throw us both onto the ground beside the bed.
I fell first, absorbing the fall onto my back before rolling around, putting myself above Padme to shield her from any harm.
I could sense the second creature prepare to lunge again, but mid-air Anakin arrived just in time to slice it into 2. And as the danger was eliminated,
I noticed my position. I was laying above Padme. I could feel her breast and breathing. They were pretty noticeable, not only by sight but also by feeling. And her breath was slow and warm. However, I quickly regained my posture and got off her, helped her up, and turned around. Just in time to see Obi-Wan jump out of the window. Chapter 52. Apprehending the Assassin. Stay here, I heard Anakin said as he began running out. But I could see a slight jealousy adorning his facial expression.
John, give him our speeder,
I said as I turned to Padme. Although I could probably join Anakin in the chase, I truly saw no reason to. I'd much rather stay here and help Padme, increasing our relationship. Not only because she's one hell of a specimen but also because she's a senator with immense political credit and every point I can get in the book with her, I'd gladly take. John didn't even respond, simply sprinting after the Jedi. They were extremely fast and therefore I wondered if John would even get the message to Anakin. Are you okay, Padme? I asked as I watched her emotions changing from shock to panic to lastly a bit of a blush, likely due to the position we held a few seconds ago. However, that quickly disappeared and she got control over herself again. Yes, Thalron.
Thanks to you,
she said as she took my hand and got off the ground. I could also see her eyes slightly aiming down to my stomach and chest. I guess she could feel my muscular obese and medium-sized chest when I helped her. Do you wish to join us in pursuing the attacker? I asked Padme and she looked at me like I was dumb. And how will you find them? Padme asked and I smiled. We gave him our speeder, didn't we? And that happens to have a tracker. I said as the realization dawned over her face and she smiled. Of course I'd like to join you. Give me a few minutes to prepare, she said and we walked out. Once we were out I turned to Alexander. How many speeders do we have? I asked since we recently borrowed one away. We had 3 speeders and now we have 2. Each speeder can take 2 pilot and 5 passengers, he said and I nodded. You and Rob will join me and Padme. Have 4 others situate themselves in the other speeders, I said and Alexander nodded, hurrying off to inform the rest. 3 minutes after we left, Padme came out and it wasn't a big shocker regarding her outfit. She wore her usual white combat clothes with a Wester 34 in her holster. You're always prepared, eh? I asked while I waved my hand for her to follow us. Being a senator isn't the safest job, she said and I nodded. I can agree with that, but it's also the one with the most corruption and security, I responded, and with that she went a bit quiet, acknowledging that I spoke the truth. We have 1 speeders, it's an Aero 23 land speeder and I'll be driving. We'll have 6 of my guards in the speeder, I said and she nodded. She knew she didn't hold any power to invite her own guards. Plus she knew my guards were superior in every way except loyalty to her. The speeder were situated right outside the apartment complex. The Aero 23 land speeder was one of the faster land speeder to exist at this time. It also had a turret on top, which meant you needed local permission to use it. Luckily senators and leaders of planets got that automatically, meaning I would not be stopped or arrested for using weaponized speeders. We climbed on board. It was designed for luxury and therefore it was quite comfy. I entered the pilot's seat and began powering up the speeder. I also turned on the tracking device, which showed the other speeder going down towards a club. The other speeder was a simple 4-seater, built for civilians but customized for luxury. However, it also included stuff like laser-proof outer layers and was quite secure. I sped ahead as the last of my guards entered. Padme decided to put herself beside me, in the gunner's seat. How would you prefer we handle the assassin? I asked Padme, although it was meant for her to answer the entire speeder, as the guards would do most of the work. Capture him. I want to get information on who hired him and put him in jail, she said, determined. It was a usual Padme decision, aiming to capture rather than kill. Ya heard her. Put weapons to stun. I heard Alexander order the rest of the guards. I looked at the built-in map to see that we were approaching the speeder, seemingly outside a restaurant. And I recognized it. It was more of a pub and a gambling building than a restaurant. Alexander, you and your men will head ahead while I and Padme will stay back, I said. I could see Padme get a bit reluctant at the prospect of sending others ahead. But I ignored her and I saw Alexander nod. Understood, Count Thalron, Alexander said and he turned to his men, all who nodded. And with that I flew over the restaurant and began flying downwards. Each Coruscant sidewalk had a small area designed to park your speeders. They were in the air, but the door or entrance facing the sidewalk allowed one to walk onto it. I approached the closest one. It was about 10 meters behind the entrance to the restaurant. We quickly went out and ran ahead. 1 guard remaining at the speeder but the other 4 followed us. As we ran, we reached 2 meters ahead when Padme stumbled and almost fall. Luckily I was beside her and caught her. I also saw Alexander turn to wait for us. But I nodded at him, signaling for him to keep going. I helped her to her feet and she gave me an appreciative nod before we began to move again. However, before we could move I felt something touch my back, before pain spread through my body and towards my head. I barely managed to look behind me to see a taser before my vision became black and I passed out. My eyes slowly opened as I groaned. However, I didn't move. My brain, albeit a bit slow, still managed to active my memory of protocol when kidnapped, which I knew I was due to the slight second where I spotted the taser.
I opened my eyes to see myself lying within a cell, and I could see a pair of shoes standing outside. Although I knew I could likely act asleep for a bit more, but I hear movement behind me and decided to properly wake up. Wouldn't want to be railed from behind by a hut. I got up onto my ass, sitting and looking around.
I was in a small cell, perhaps the size of 3 single beds side by side was about the size of the cell, and about 3 meters in height.
However, looking around, I quickly spotted another organic lying on the metal floor. Focusing my eyes on it, I quickly realized it was Padme, and she was slowly waking up.
I ignored her for a few seconds and looked outside the cell, and through the right side of the cell I could slightly see a cockpit, and outside the windows to the cockpit I could see a black void.
Fuck, we were on a ship in space. Meaning they are bringing us somewhere. But the question is where, and who has something against me and Padme? Honestly, it could just be Padme's enemies, but I was in the wrong place, or the other way around. We had a few common enemies. Count Dooku, Viceroy Gunray, and a lot of senators. That's when I heard Padme fully wake up. Aga.
Where am I?
She mumbled as she lifted her upper body and leaned on her right hand. Shoo, we've been captured and we're currently in a cell on a ship. I said, and she struggled to fully absorb that.
Ha!
Thalron?
Is that you?
She exclaimed before cutting her voice down a bit.
Yes, it's me.
Was my simple response.
Oh God, we've been captured.
She said to herself as she slowly digested the news. Any idea who it is? She asked after calming down. Probably bounty hunters. The security is slack and ship not very well maintained. As to whom hired them, Count Dooku and Viceroy Gunray are a few that comes to the top of my head.
I said, and she began thinking. Do you know where we're headed?
She asked, and I shook my head, a sigh escaping her after that.
Let's just hope we won't be killed immediately after. I said as I began looking through my clothes.
The first thing I noticed was that I had a big collar around my neck. Holy fuck, that was bad. But better than a slave chip. I couldn't find my hidden pistols, communications device, or anything. They had completely strapped me. Although I still had clothes on, but it wasn't much. A white shirt and black pants. While I did that, Padme did the same. However, they hadn't even touched any of her clothes but removed her holster, pistol, and everything.
What is this?
Padme said after getting over the slight panic attack she had when she found it. Probably something equal to that of a slave collar, meaning they can kill you for looking at them the wrong way. I said, not helping with her panic, but eventually she calmed down.
And with that, silence enveloped both of us as we began thinking.
Or more so, Padme began thinking. I already had a plan. It was suggested by Alexander 7 years ago. Something to ensure they could always find me. Something called a chip. We spent close to 1 trillion credits to design a chip completely invisible to any sensors. It included a GPS tracker and something I could mentally order to call for help. Meaning Alexander knew of my position and was likely on his way with the majority of the fleet. However, I still needed a way to get this fucking collar off me, as they're likely to kill all of us before letting anyone else get us. So they might kill us the second Alexander arrives. However, I couldn't tell Padme this quite yet, as I wasn't sure they weren't listening, and if they learned of it, they're likely to drop me off but still bring Padme or just outright kill us both. Soon enough, Padme broke the silence.
What do we do?
She asked, a bit fearfully. We can't do anything, let's wait and hope our allies find us. I said calmly. However, this didn't sit right with her.
What?
We can't just do nothing and hope for someone to find us.
We have to make it easier for them or escape at the very least.
Padme said angrily. Relax. We need to focus on remaining alive. Alexander has a method on tracking down people, and it has never failed. I said, which relaxed her a bit. Of course that was complete bullshit. Alexander didn't have any way to track down people, but he had a way to accurately track us.
Fine, but dash, she tried, only to be interrupted.
A man walked up to us. It was a male Zabrak with white markings.
If it ain't the nice senator. Senator Amidala and the other guy.
I don't care for your name.
All I know is that someone wants you to suffer. He said, and he began smiling maliciously.
Luckily the spice mines also pays me to bring people there, so I get paid for 2 jobs at the same time. He said. Oh, poor guy. His greed had clouded his judgment. The bounty was likely to torture us and then kill us. But he would sell us to the spice mines. Although death was almost certain, so I understand his way of thinking, he should still have just killed us. However, Padme got frightened. She knew the dangers of working on a spice mine, but she was scared for all the wrong reasons. And even better. This spice mine isn't for slaves, but for criminals. He said before taking a dramatical break.
And a few of them might be rapers. And you young lady is quite fine, if I may say so myself.
He said with a malicious smile again. If I didn't despise humans, I would borrow you for a night as well. He said before walking away, while laughing. And with that I barely saw him take out a stick sort of thing and pressing a button on the top. And my view blackened again. Chapter 53, Entering the Mine. When I next woke up, it was to the unfortunate sensation of someone kicking me in the side. The deep full-body ache from being stunned by his controller was still causing problems within my body, with a few pings of pain when I used certain parts of my body. My so-called jailer then began speaking. Wake the fuck up before I electrocute you.
Wake up the lady senator beside you and prepare to leave the ship. he said before walking away. And with that a few voices sounded over the comms. Using codes, the Zobrick bounty hunter assigned different bounty hunters to prisoners. I had somewhat recognized the ship as a Pelta-class frigate. My best guess was that it was hijacked and customized to maintain a large crew and jail cells. Soon enough I sensed the familiar change in the ship as we landed, followed by the Zobrick bounty hunter and a Rodian bounty hunter appearing within my eyesight. By now Padme had stood up beside me. She was woken by the voice of me being kicked in the side of my stomach. "Listen to what they say, Padme. This is not the time to strike," I whispered to her as the doors to every cell opened with a resounding swoosh. "Come on, walk," the Zobrick male said as the Zobrick walked in front of us and the Rodian at our back. Soon enough others joined behind us as the Zobrick bounty hunter, which I now assumed was the leader, led us out of the ship. As we stepped onto the landing pad, a foul smell assaulted my nose and mouth, pushing into my body as oxygen and finally beginning to burn my lungs. However, I quickly managed to gather myself and only stumbled 2 steps to the side by the initial assault. However, Padme wasn't as lucky as I saw her stumble straight towards the ground. However, I caught her and held her up. I could see her arms moving in reflex and her mouth opened. "Do not cough, it will make it worse," I said, recognizing the easy symptoms of coughing. Padme gathered herself and fought to push the cough back down into her lungs. And she stabilized herself. All around me, I could see the bounty hunters having already equipped themselves with masks, the Zobrick looking at us with a malicious look, enjoying our misfortune. I also spotted every other prisoner being in a similar state but worse. However, I also recognized that a few species suffered more than others, and humans seemed to be struggling the most. That's when a speeder approached us. It was similar to the future speeder used by the Empire. It included multiple standing areas on the hull of the ship, where one could stand before being enveloped by a mechanism, making an escape near impossible. However, the guy driving it quickly stepped up to the bounty hunters, and I could see it on his face. He was furious. "You trying to kill the miners before they get to mine?" he said with spite before 4 of his guards approached us with masks. I quickly took on my mask. It was a half-face breathed. It was extremely old, and I wouldn't be shocked if a few of them were dated to before the Risen Reformation. I also realized the guards didn't have one uniform, but instead was a mix of individual gear, armor, and clothes. There were also different species. "Get your asses onto the speeder," the same man who had just given us masks said as he pointed to the speeder. The bounty hunters surrounded us as we approached the speeders, but a problem quickly arose. We were 16, but the speeder only had 4 prison holders on each side, a total of 8. "I will give you a quick briefing of your situation. You are currently on Magravia, a spice mine owned by the Corporate Alliance," he said before waving his arms around. "The surface does not have breathable oxygen, and you will die after 5 minutes of continuous inhaling of said oxygen. The spice mines are within bubbles of oxygen. They will allow you to work without your mask but also function as an enforcement device. The thing around your neck will kill you if you step out of the bubble, so once you go in you can never go out," he said while pointing to our collar thing. "If you're lucky you might get to experience the other variables and uses of the prison collar," he said before ending his debriefing. "You are assigned to Mine B, Branch L. Now get into the speeder. 2 per holding," he said as he left us to head into the speeder. His 4 guards followed him while the remaining 15 bounty hunters hurried us into the speeder. I and Padme were hurried into one holding. We couldn't even choose ourselves, although I doubt either of us would want to be with anyone else. As the holding tightened, enveloping both me and Padme, I could feel her being pressed against me. Due to the bounty hunter's hurry, I had been pushed backward onto the holding, but Padme was fast enough to turn around, so she didn't smash her back foot into the metal before getting on. That kind of hurts. However, that put us in an awkward position, Padme's chest pressing down on mine. I could see her blush and I could feel my little brother getting a bit harder. That wouldn't do. I focused on other things, eventually managing to stop its growth. It was a bit awkward, but before the bounty hunters could fully close the holding, Padme managed to barely turn around, her back facing towards my stomach. However, now I had her ass positioned straight at my little brother, and let me tell you, she somehow packed a big punch there as well. She also had a crazy hourglass figure. However, I was broken out of my musings by Padme. "Put your arms around me so we get more space," she said, although I could feel her body heat beginning to rise a bit. She was correct. At this time my hands were hurting due to being pressed into the sides. I had kept them at my sides as I didn't want to intrude on her personal space. But with her acknowledgement, I put my arms around her, mainly her stomach. And shockingly enough, she leaned back onto my chest. I didn't know if she did it due to wanting more space, or certain other reasons. But I responded by tightening my arms around her. "It's going to be okay, Padme. Just stick to me," I whispered into her ears, slightly shocking her before regaining her composure. "I'll entrust my life to you then, Thalron," she managed to say before the speeder sped off, ending any attempt at communication. It was quite comfy actually, although my back ached a bit. But I knew the other prisoners had it worse due to being with a complete stranger, and it was also a bit cold due to the speed and us being outside the hull. However, we managed to hold a lot of warmth due to our closeness. Soon enough, after flying past a single large mining facility, we entered the second one, what I presumed to be Mine B. We flew up to an entrance leading underground as the holdings were opened. Many of the others fell or stumbled out due to leaning on the holding doors, but me and Padme remained still due to not even touching the outer parts. But we then jumped down. 10 guards welcomed us as the 4 guards and the 1 leader approached us. Greetings, I am Foreman Saw. You will refer to me as Foreman. I oversee Branch L of Mine B. The more spice you mine, the better benefits you get. Simple. Now get your asses into the mine, he said as we were led under the ground. The first room split us into ladies and gentlemen, or women and men. There we were ordered to take off our clothes before being handed simple orange jumpsuits with a number on them. My number was BL 081109. BL for Mine B, Branch L. And the numbers were just numbers. After we were done, we were directed into the next room where we waited for everyone to be done. As the last left, we were brought even further, through multiple checkpoints, command structures, and other areas before finally after a 5-minute walk we reached the mine. As we entered, I realized we were on an elevated platform. It was made out of a stone which had the color of red. There was an elevator leading down to the mine. All right, this is where you'll spend most of your time. Equipment is under us, and the elevator is the only way up. Now get down there, the foreman said before ushering us down. I felt Padme hold on to me as we were pushed onto the first elevator, and as it was filled it traveled down 20 meters to reach the mine. The mine was just a large hole in the ground. Some places were wider than others, sometimes longer, and all around me stood men with resonance grinders and other tools. Padme followed me as we walked up onto an equipment area, and we both took our tools and equipment before heading to stand beside someone who obviously looked veteran. The process of mining out the spice veins was simple but grueling. According to AZ, the female Rodian working beside us, we would mine into the stone, following the lines of Mediari until they ran out. When a layer is clear, they come in with large machines and carve forward, pushing deeper into the spice vein. We would have to load up the crushed rock, as well as any carvings we pull free now. Luckily, we had managed to arrive just after the last major carving, meaning we had a few days of easier work ahead of us. I then began working, not extremely hard but also not slow, aiming to maintain as much of my stamina as possible. After 1 hour of repeating these simple instructions, after I had dumped my last hours of work into a mine cart, I began feeling slight stinging in my fingertips. I asked Padme and she informed me that she had the same problem. That was when the Rodian cleared the questions. It's the spice when it comes into contact with your sweat making it caustic. It's a slow process but you'll likely have blisters tonight. Eventually you'll get immune. But the species who doesn't sweat or has a natural immunity towards it therefore usually performs better the first few days. The Rodian said and I nodded at him, thankful for the information he had given us. Although I guess we would eventually find out how it worked. After another 3 hours of working, a few speeders filled with water tanks entered the mine and began handing out water. However, my initial assumption of it being water was wrong as I noticed there was something else in it. Of course, we turned towards the Rodian for answers. What is in the water? Padme asked and I looked at the Rodian, anxious for answers. Naturalizer. It's impossible to keep the Mediari from spreading, so the neutralizer keeps it from burning your insides. Rodian said and my eyes shot wide open. Well, that sucked. After another 3 hours of work, the foreman's voice entered the speakers as he informed us of work time being over. We had to drag our carts to the entrance before giving our carts and identification numbers to the guards. After that, everyone was herded into a massive cleaning room, both men and women. We were then sprayed down by a blue foamy neutralizing agent, and once that was done we were led into the barracks. And shockingly enough they were not split into women and men sections. I thought as I looked at the massive barrack. I would need to protect Padme. Chapter 54. Keeping myself alive. As we entered the barracks we found ourselves within the cross-gender cells. Padme, I assume you do not have a problem with us finding a cell for both of us? I asked, looking over at Padme. Her mouth was open and she was shocked. I could even see that she was beyond terrified. Why yes, I'm certain that will be acceptable, she said and I began chuckling. Alright, come on. Let's get us some food, I said as I walked towards the cantina, if it can be called that. It was a small room inside with a lot of vending machines. You scanned your prison collar and you got one of the food blocks. It was a simple block full of protein. Tasted shit but it gave us the energy to work. While we were eating that I led Padme towards the cells. Do not look at anyone, don't talk with anyone. If you are pushed or messed with, come to me and don't fight. Unless they attempt to permanently hurt you or rape you, I said as the information hit her. This was serious. I am confident they will come and save us, but we do not know when. We can still die here. Either grab your ass or chest then just get away. It's not worth dying or being hurt for, I said as we entered the highest cells. As we got to the end we finally found an empty cell. There were no clothes or anything signalizing anyone lived here. We'll each take the top bunk. They're easier to escape from, I said as I jumped onto the top bunk closest to the entrance. Padme nodded and jumped onto hers, but I could see a slight wetness in the corner of her eyes. Not shocking. It would be normal to be terrified about these change of events. I just hope this doesn't change much. Sure, Anakin won't join Padme on Naboo, but I hope Obi-Wan continues his search. And with that time passed, I spent most of my time laying down looking into the roof. I also took a quick trip out of the cell and leaning over the railing. On the ground there were multiple tables and chairs. Around them the gangs were easy to spot. There was one gang made out of majority Rodians, another had 4 of those pig hut guards, I don't even care to remember their name.
but the 4 of them had quite the power. There were also 3 Trandoshans whom nobody messed with, a few Zobraks mixed with a human gang, and a Togruta Twi'lek gang. They were mostly peaceful, but they had the largest numbers. Lastly, I could see 2 Wookiees sitting close to the Togruta Twi'lek group, those 2 likely working together. And lastly, there were 5 to 6 mixed gangs, with humans and many other races. Although in total there were more humans. However, humans did not band together like other races. We humans had races in between each others. Looking around, I realized most of the guys on this level was those not affiliated with the gangs and any groups with any influence. I guess that is why this place was deserted. A lot of those up here were women, beautiful men and older people. My guess is that this is the place where those in the gangs comes to get some pleasure. Meaning we were on the wrong fucking cell. Cell doors close in 15 minutes. A voice came over the intercom. Fuck.
Padme, get up and gather anything you left.
I said as she leaned up. She too had not slept yet.
Why?
She asked. We're moving to another cell. I said as she stood up. Each cell had 2 bunk beds, meaning I might need to fight 4 guys to get their cell. Well, if my hand-to-hand training was working, I wouldn't have any problems. It might be getting rough. I said as she jumped down from the top bed. I looked at the ladder going to the top bunk. It was metal, iron to be precise. However, the ends had become rusty. I gathered all my strength into my right foot and kicked it as hard as I could. It bent slightly first time. I repeated it 10 times until it flew out of its position. I then bent the iron rod back into shape. There were now 12 minutes left.
All right, let's go.
I said as Padme followed me and we walked down the stairs. I hid the rod in my pants as we walked through the entire 5th level. There were 6 in total.
I saw no rooms that looked weak. All of them had a lot of large men in it.
As I got to the end, I found the room. There were 4 individuals inside. 1 Rodian and 2 human, and lastly 1 woman Togruta, though she looked scared, likely brought inside to pleasure the 3 men tonight. Yo, I was wondering if you could help me with something? I said as I stepped into the jail cell. Padme remained outside. The Rodian stepped up with both of the humans flanking him.
Oh, what is that?
The Rodian said before looking at Padme.
Oh,
quite a beauty there. Perhaps we can trade night entertainment. He said again, and I could see the 2 humans beside him smile maliciously.
Oh, well, I need you to vacate this cell,
I said, and they looked at me before beginning to laugh.
Nah, I don't think so.
The Rodian said as I saw their fists tighten in the corner of my eyes. My hands were in my pocket. I took them out as quick as I could and moved them into the back of my pants. He threw a punch at me, but I had already accomplished what I wanted. I grabbed the iron rod before smashing it into the right side of his face. He immediately staggered into the bed on the left side. I then sent a left hook with the iron rod, sending the human on the right into the bed as well. The guy on the left sent a hook straight at my face, but I avoided it before smashing the rod into the neck on his right side. He slumped down on the ground immediately.
Get the fuck out of my crib.
I shouted at the 2 remaining guys inside and they ran off immediately. I grabbed the guy on the ground and threw him out before kicking him in the side. The skirmish had caught the eyes of many, and they were looking at me as I dragged the guy by his feet out of the cell. Padme looked shocked. I suggest you get in, Padme. You don't want to see this, I said. But of course she did not follow my suggestion. I walked to the stairs. They were circular going downwards. I walked up to it and threw him down. Don't know how logic worked, but he ended up rolling all the way down, falling onto the main area. People were leaving and they all spotted him, before looking up. And I leaned over the railing, showing my face as the one who beat his ass. I needed to show these fuckers I wasn't messed with. Closing in 5 minutes. The voice said, and with that everyone got out of their stupor and walked towards the cells. I turned around to face Padme.
Was that necessary?
She asked as I walked into the cell. She followed. I needed to show them we're not to be messed with, I said as I climbed onto the top bunk. The Togruta had ran away long ago.
And why did we move?
Padme asked. I noticed that all of the ones on the 6th level were women, old and weak men, meaning that if we slept there, we were likely to be met by a gang wanting to rape you, I said, and with that she got shocked. After a few seconds she responded. Thank why you, but how do you know? She asked, and thanking. Because you're the most beautiful female here, I said, and I knew she had a large blush on her face without even looking. Thank you, she finally said before climbing into her bed. No problem, we're together in this after all, I said as the doors closed shut, temporarily ensuring our safety. Unless someone had bribed the guards for the key, and if they did I would give them a surprise. I then felt the iron rod lying under my pillow before dozing off to sleep. The next morning I was woken by slight steps and speaking. I opened my left eye to see 3 men walking in. One of them even had an iron rod. I guess I wasn't the only one who thought about that. I saw him walk towards me and lift his hands to attack. I swung my right foot into his face, which he clearly did not accept, throwing him onto his ass outside the cell. I grabbed the iron rod before sliding onto the cell ground. Once I arrived I smashed my iron rod into the back head of a guy looking at Padme, not expecting me to put up a fight. As he fell towards the ground I grabbed the back of his head and smashed him into the railing on the lower bunk. He did not move after hitting the ground. I dodged low as the 3rd guy threw a punch. He then threw a kick forcing me to step back. The guy with the iron rod then joined the other guy. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Padme with a terrified look. The rod guy advanced first, throwing his rod towards my right side. I blocked it with my forearm. Biting through the pain, I punched him with my right arm. The rod was held in a reverse grip, and as the first guy staggered back, I spun around before slamming it into the third guy's throat. As he staggered back, I kicked him, sending him further backwards, and actually ended up flipping over the railing. I was shocked at that but quickly got over it. Stepping out of the cell, I kicked the rod guy on the ground multiple times in his side, before kicking him in his face, bloodying him up, until finally I once again threw another down the stairs. With that I looked at Padme, who were about to burst into tears. "It's fine. I doubt anyone will come after this," I said as she relaxed. After she calmed down, we both went out of the cell and furthermore down the stairs. We then got breakfast at the vending machine before starting another day's work. Although I hadn't noticed it a lot due to the fighting, I had some annoying and painful blisters at the top of my fingers. And with that we entered the mines for another 12 hours of grueling work. Me and Padme went to the same station as last time, staying together at all times. We might have made a few enemies with those beatdowns. Chapter 55. The Future / Not a Chapter. Chapter 56. Prison Life. That shower you get every day after work is just annoying as fuck. They have guards with hoses spraying the shit out of you. If you're lucky you get a quick shower and then you're good. But if you're unlucky, he gets spraying the shit out of you. He obviously enjoyed doing that to Padme. Don't know why, but she ended up completely drowned in that customized water. The water even tastes like shit. After that we went into a room. There we were given a towel to drain ourselves. And they didn't change into men and women rooms this time either, which ended up with a few of the women being approached. Although nobody approached me and Padme. Luckily the prison jumpsuit had some kind of water-resistant thing as we weren't wet, but the jumpsuit was. So I got to see the interesting sight of a bunch of men and women drying of their clothes with a towel. After that we were ushered into the main room. Padme and I headed straight to the food dispenser and got some food. After eating it, I still felt a bit hungry. That's when I spotted the 3 guys who tried to rape Padme this morning. I walked up to him and grabbed his food block. He turned to me angrily and I saw him tighten his fist. However, as he saw me, he looked down and simply walked away. Good for him. I turned to the other 2 who were about to walk away as well. I struck out my hand and looked at them. "Well, whatcha waiting for, pussy? Hand it over," I said, and they both ended up doing it. I felt a bit bad, but when I thought about how many they had likely raped, I didn't care anymore. A day being hungry doesn't even compare to a day being raped. And with that I walked away. Padme looked at me with narrowed eyes, wanting me to explain. I was hungry, and it's a strategic move to make them hungry, that way they won't attack us or rape anyone due to lack of energy, I said before handing her one of the food blocks. It was true, but not like I gave a shit about the other women. Most of them were criminals either way, and I wanted to show dominance over those fuckers. She eventually accepted it due to the allure of food. As we walked towards the bunk, I saw one of the human groups wave me over. "Padme, stay here, I'll be right back," I said looking at her. She originally looked shocked, but it was soon replaced by curiosity. "Oh, okay, don't take too long," she said as I walked off. As I headed towards the group, I counted their numbers. They had captured one of the tables in the middle, showing their status. I saw 15 of them sitting there, around one human, blue eyes, brown hair, and simply looked like an average human. However, he had quite the build, not bulky but still big. However, he had 5 large men surrounding him, all human. And then the largest Zabrak I had ever seen. The rest was a mix between Rhodians and Nyctos. As I approached them, the leader began speaking. So you're the guy who beat up 6 guys within his first 24 hours here?" he said, looking me over. "I suppose so. Who are you?" I asked. He began chuckling before responding. "I am Forrest Gump, the leader of the Gump Gang," he said, and I almost began straight out laughing. Forrest Gump. He did not look like Forrest Gump. "Unless he can run, that is." "I see. And what did you call me over here for?" I asked, and he smiled maliciously. "Your lady. She is quite the specimen. And you've done a lot to save her. Moved away from the top area, you have quite the perception to notice it, and then beat up 3 members of a gang. Is she your girlfriend or wife?" he asked with a smile and slight predatory glint in his eyes. He wanted her. It was the simple conclusion I came to. "You can say so, and I don't plan on sharing," I said. I knew I sounded like a wife beater like fuck, but if I said I love her with all my heart, then I'd be fighting off guys every 3rd minute. "I see. Well, however beautiful your girlfriend is, you're much more interesting," he said with a smile. "Nah, does he swing that way?" "I don't swing that way," I said, and with that he began laughing. "And no, that's not what I mean," he tried while laughing. After containing himself, he spoke. "No, your ability to fight is what's interesting. You can take out 3 guys within 20 seconds. That's skill. Few of my men can claim to have done the same," he said. "Ah, he was offering me a spot in his gang." "I see, and what do I get out of it?" I asked, looking over his 15 men. They were strong, I could tell, but they weren't the strongest. The 3 Wookiee would wipe the floor with them, and if I'm correct and the Twi'lek / Torgruta gang is with them, then they would be fucked. No matter how strong they are.
Protection, of course.
You'll get a spot on the second level, a room all to yourself, and we'll ensure nobody gets close to your girlfriend over there,"
he said, before pointing at Padme.
I could see 5 Rhodians making their way towards her. So did 2 Gamorreans.
Fine. I'll join you for now and see how things are done.
But I'm not 100% loyal yet,
I said, and he smiled. That was likely usual here. Nobody was loyal the second they joined. That's fine. Do you want help with those guys? He said, nodding towards those approaching Padme.
Nah, I'll deal with them,
I said before walking off.
Now, I don't know if it was smart to join a gang considering the fact I'm leaving in a few days, but unless a major gang war breaks out, then I'll be good. As I was walking towards Padme and she looking at me gratefully, she had noticed those 2 groups approaching her as well. The Rhodians noticed me and walked another way. They did not want to fight me, it seems.
However, the Gamorreans didn't.
They walked up to Padme and surrounded her with their fat stomach as I was 5 meters away.
I walked around them and behind Padme.
"And no thank you," I heard she said as I approached her. "You heard the lady, she don't wanna."
"So shoo," I said with a cocky smile. I could take these 2 easily.
"Honk honk," was what I got before they walked away.
"Did they speak basic to you?" I asked as they walked away.
"Yes, I was shocked as well,"
she said before smiling.
"Thanks. And what happened out there?"
she asked as we began moving to our new cell.
He had given me the number before I left. It was already prepped for me, it seems. "I got invited to their gang,"
I said as we walked off on the second level. 214 was our cell.
"Did you accept?"
she asked.
"I did. We've now got their protection and a new cell,"
I said before directed her into the new cell.
There was nobody inside and I could even see a makeshift shank on one of the tables. Aren't they generous?
"Are you sure that's smart?"
she asked as I laid down on the top bunk.
None of the bunks in the cell had duvets.
"I think it is, unless a war breaks out,"
I said, and she went quiet at that. That's when a voice came over the intercom.
"A disease has spread through the barracks. Everyone are to return to their cell to be sprayed by disinfectant. The temperature will also be reduced to 12 Celsius. We suggest you get heat in any way possible,"
the voice said.
"Fuck," was my only response as the prisoners began running into their cells. I grabbed the shank and sat down in the bottom bunk. Didn't want anyone to run in here during their panic.
What? Do you think the disease is deadly?" Padme asked as she got down on the ground.
"Don't know, but we should make a makeshift bed to stay warm after the shower," I said as I grabbed the beds from the metal rim in the bottom's bunks and put them over each other in a stack. Lastly, I took the Padme's bed and mine's and put them on top. The meaning of the was that the top bed would get wet, but those under would remain dry. Of course the sides would be wet, but only one side and you don't lay on the sides. "Why'd you do that?"
Padme asked while watching.
"To keep 3 of the mattresses dry," I told her. That's when the cell door began to close. All of the inmates are required to take off their jumpsuit after the shower. The cold will slowly kill the disease. Your underclothes may remain," the voice said, and I sighed. Basically, we now needed to sleep without our jumpsuit, Padme in her bikini and I in my underwear, which was just a shorts essentially.
And that's when the shower started.
I could see the top mattress get wet, but the ones under remained dry.
After 3 minutes it stopped. Both me and Padme were drenched. I took off my jumpsuit before beginning to create a slight hole. I let the bottom mattress in the previous stack remain, put another against the wall and a third going over it. It was now essentially a right triangle. I turned around to see that Padme too had taken off her jumpsuit.
I was caught staring for a few seconds. She was extremely so beautiful, a nice hourglass figure. Everything was sort of perfect.
She blushed before speaking softly.
"Don't stare."
And with that I got out of my trance. Sorry.
"Well, it's cold as fuck, so we'll need to maintain some heat. We both need to sleep inside there and we'll put the top mattress above us," I said, and she nodded, understanding. And with that I went in. I laid my back against the mattress of the wall before waiting for Padme to get in. She laid herself in front of me, just a few centimeters between us.
"Good night," I said before closing my eyes.
However, I failed to sleep. Don't know if it was my hormones working or I just couldn't sleep. But after a few minutes I opened my eyes and laid on my back before sighing. This trip had greatly enhanced my relationship with Padme. Now the question is if I should get in a relationship with her. It might fuck up a lot considering Anakin and the future, but I was in love, it was no denying it. So the choice was between my feelings and the better choice. But honestly, I had fucked up a lot already, and maybe Anakin finds love in Sabe or some shit, her doppelganger. Honestly, that would be funny, extremely much so. That's when I was thrown out of my thoughts by Padme.
"Can't sleep?" she asked.
"Nope,"
I responded.
That's when she turned around and faced me. I could feel her breath up against my face. Even after all of this, she somehow smelled good.
"Thank you, Thalron,
for all of this," she said as she got slightly closer. "It's no problem. We are both in this together," I said as she leaned her face forward, and so did I. And with that out, lips interlocked as we began kissing. She was a great kisser, but I was no slacker either. We remained in that position for a few seconds before pulled away. She tried, but I simply smiled. Before going in for it again, but this time I took my arms around her before pushing us together, both of us interlocking our lips and bodies. I then grabbed her ass and we began making out, for close to 20 minutes before we both decided to go to sleep. She turned around, putting her back against my chest and stomach. I continued to hold my hands around her before I dipped off to sleep. What a great day. Chapter 57. Reinforcements arrive. After that night, we squared up the day after. We became official girlfriend and boyfriend if that wasn't obvious enough before. We never took it to the next level, at least not yet. Just kissing and feeling, but I cannot deny the fact that I am complacent with this relationship. It would be naive of me to think we'd do the devil's tango, or reproduction immediately. This isn't some Chinese novel or fanfiction. Just because you fall in love doesn't mean you immediately have sex. It might have been that before, when the bride and groom were carried into a bed by their friends. But that was thousands of years before I died on Earth. And StarWars is no difference. Except that perhaps hundreds of thousands of years after Earth's level of technology. After that night the days passed as usual. The gang provided a lot of extra food, perhaps from the guards or just by stealing. But considering the amount of prisoners, I doubt one could steal enough to feed the entire gang X2. My day count reached 5 when the attack happened. It was in the middle of a slave working period, having just gotten the water and returning to work. The alarms blared red, ordering everyone to return to their cells. Most prisoners were afraid. Perhaps they would be killed. But I and Padme were both excited as fuck. We'd finally get out of this shithole. As we returned to our cells they closed. Immediately after we heard explosions far away. I guessed Admiral Yularen led this attack. He was most experienced in planetary assault. His work in the judicial forces and Senate intelligence including relieving a planetary defense or root out Republic terrorist. Without a doubt he had likely participated in this exact scenario. Working for Senate intelligence, majority of his role was fighting potential threats to the Senate and or extracting senators. Soon enough, seconds turned to minutes and minutes turned to half an hour. Half an hour turned to an hour. And an hour turned into 2, until eventually, the doors were opened and thousands of royal guards swarmed into the barracks. Alexander headed straight for me with a device in his hand.
He went straight for my door and smiled. He spoke into his device. The Bacta tank has been secured. He spoke. Good evening, Alexander. I said with a smile as the cell opened. He bent down on one knee.
Welcome back, Count Thalron, we've been waiting. And with that I could hear a collective sigh of relief from the royal guards. I could also see every cell in front of me having heads struck out of their cell with their mouths open.
Let's get out of here, Padme. I said, taking her hand and walking out. Wolf Yularen POV. My eyes opened as we reached the planet of Magravia. The only planet in the Magravia system. In orbit of the planet was a singular Cumulus-class destroyer. It wasn't even able to fire before our ships collectively launched all their fire. The command had already been given 3 hours ago. No strategy was needed in these types of battles. They had no way to oppose us. Even the newly growing CIS army.
Yes, the Separatist movement command was stupid if they did not think we would find out. My Senate intelligence contacts and informants coupled with the Veridian intelligence agency deduced the threat before they even got their first ship. The Senate intelligence was then later given the information from the Chancellor, although I do suspect it might have to do with Thalron visiting him 2 hours before that. Looking over at the fleet now launching lots, I could not deny the fact that my pride was ever growing. I was a part of the council commanding this fleet and 2 other like it. The first attack fleet, led by Trench. The Spider beside me. However, the first attack fleet had its own addition, namely the first carrier section. Or, namely 2 Looker-Hull-class battleships, fully outfitted with everything required to launch an invasion. Firstly, its surface attack capabilities. 750 Alpha V wings, 250 H-6 bombers, 2,000 LAT/I, infantry, 1,000 Latslashe, 3,000 Canderous-class assault tank, 300 all-terrain open transport, AT-OP, 1,000 Veridian I ground transports, VGD-1, 700 all-terrain attack pod, AT-AP, 200 J-1 proton cannons, 500 av 7 antivehicle artillery, 550 HVW A6 Juggernaut, 150,000 various solidars. And this was for each Looker-Hulk, although the current number of both together barely reached the tens of thousands. The potential power each of these has cannot be underestimated. The Looker-Hulk is the most genius design of the Trade Federation. The simplicity in running the Looker-Hulks makes it unique. Barely requiring 3,000 crew to run it, then additionally it requires 20,000 B-1 battle droids to run it. Those droids customized to engineering the Looker-Hulks and managing the vehicles. The only problem was that it was designed for the Trade Federation, and then as such we only fully managed to safe it for combat the day Count Thalron was kidnapped. However, we had already begun the creation of 4 more Looker-Hulks, which would take a lot of time according to Intelligence. The reason I know this is because I had to lend an entire 80% of our cyber crew. Although they were almost entirely made out of recruits, but after 10 years of working on cracking the work of veteran cybersecurity programming they should be more efficient. Maybe we could even crack the HoloNet. Disregarding that I turned back to the battle. Launch Flotilla 1 through 10 into orbit and prepare for orbital bombardment. I shouted. My order was acknowledged by one of the 3 communications officer. Form the heavy battle line upon the closest hyperspace jump coordinations. Create a support line behind the heavy line. Send the 20 Corsairs into the atmosphere. They'll perform precise bombardment. I said, and it got acknowledged by the second communications officer. Deploy all forces at critical mine positions. Take them over. Deploy the 1st and 2nd Royal Guard battalions alongside Lord Commandant Alexander to count Veridian's position.
I said, and the third one got to work. Trench, you're in command of the space battles. I said as I turned to him. Tisk 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 tisk. Sounds good. These slavers shall gain no reinforcements, nor any aid. He said before beginning to organize the formation. And with that I turned towards the ground battle.
Led by General Tyr, I could see 700 LAT/Is flying out of the Lookerhulks, followed by fighter escorts, bombers and 500 LAT/Cs carrying the Candrass-class assault tank.
Quickly after the troops landed they utilized a tactic created by Thalron, Blitzkrieg. The tanks rushed across the surface, destroying any defensive positions, followed closely by bombers and lots. The essence of the tactic was for the Candrass-class tanks to push through any defensive positions. Then a LAAT detachment would land and eradicate or capture any remaining forces. Once that was done they would leave a small garrison and continue. By using the quick deployment of LAAT/Is and the LAAT/C capable of picking the tank up if it cannot cross an obstacle. However, this required full aerial superiority, which we had. The tactic was enforced by the H-6 bombers. What made the bombers unique was their large build, allowing them to carry a lot of droids, but also advanced steering and flying capabilities. It had the ability to remain still and drop bombs. Meaning if it stopped in front of your trench or position, then you're fucked. And honestly, this tactic worked perfectly in synchronize of our focus, which was naval and fighter focus. The settlements fell, one after another. All the guards were rounded up, some killed and some not. The entirety of the spice cartel controlling the planet was killed. None would be left. However, the royal guards were in fact quite enraged that someone dared to touch their god in disguise. I had never seen a force more dedicated to their leader. They looked upon him as a god, someone who came down to lead Thyferra into the greatest planet.
My intelligence suggests Alexander may have quite the talent in psychological manipulation and control.
And they planned to make an example of these fuckers. The cities were put under military control and everyone was told to remain inside their houses. Lux's marines were dropping on all the spice transports throughout the planet. I had decided to cease all spice products. They could be to use of Thalron, even if just to sell it. Although I doubt he would, as the spice from this planet was not nearly profitable enough to bother. Bacta was just too much. And after hours of battle, namely 2 multiple orbital bombardments, and we finally secured the Bacta tank, codename for Mr. Thalron Veridian. After he was found, a Lambda shuttle was sent down followed by 24 Alpha V wings. As I stood in the Lambda shuttle's cargo hold, hugging Padme, she was almost crying of joy. She didn't fully cry, but I could see a certain witness in her eyes. She was, however, extremely happy. Alexander had also briefed me on the way. Apparently after they lost me they immediately began the hunt. The first Veridian attack fleet was sent before the bounty hunters even got out of hyperspace. They had brought the 2 Lookerhulks. I didn't even know they were cleared for service. I had spent a lot of time on those 2 and I'm excited to begin adding those massive carriers. 2 of them in every fleet will make fighting us almost impossible. For the Republic to gain a starfighter's advantage they'd need 4 of them to counter the Lookerhulks, not to count the other ships. And in a few moments we'll be gathering a lot of solidars, expert pilots and naval crews. Although the judicial served on smaller ships and different systems, they'll quickly understand and will welcome a new batch of crewmen and solidars. Perhaps we can build the 4th fleet as well. I'd also been informed of General Tyr's tactic, the Blitzkrieg. I planned to utilize the strong strategy created by the Germans in 2WW. If the Germans didn't have a Nazi leader and go around pissing the entire world off, they might have done something, but that didn't happen. So I had essentially created my own military discipline. A mix of the German and British way of fighting. The Brits had something nobody could compete with them in, naval strength. My navy is similar, but that's not what I took from them. No, instead it's simple. Throw money at the problem. Causalities? Throw money. Strong resistance? Throw money. My decision was simple. I had a lot of money, and the galaxy would witness 50 years of straight-up conflict, then peace and once again war. So, I'd give my solidars the best equipment, spam tanks, spam fighters, spam artillery, spam everything mechanical. Tanks were a menace on the battlefield as shown throughout the Clone Wars series. The basic of encountering an AAT without tank support was run at it and try to throw grenades into the hull. By simply sealing the entrances and having sufficient support from LAAT/Is above would be more than enough. And that's where the previous German discipline comes in, rushing in with tanks and then capturing it. But it was 3 times more effective when I could land my troops right behind the tanks, seconds after they pierce the enemy fortifications. And even if we do not have aerial supremacy, it could still work with ground carriers. That's when the shuttle shaked a bit as we entered a new gravity, namely the hangar of the Imperator-class Star Destroyer, the Terror. Now, how is Obi-Wan's mission going? Chapter 58, Return. I laid in my room, just staring into the roof. A lot had changed during these last years. Shmi Skywalker, I had almost completely forgotten her. She truly has no real talent, and as such she has been making food for us, or more so serving it. I knew I had her utmost loyalty due to saving her and her son,
additionally to letting him marry a certain man having Lars his surname.
Also gave him mechanical feet. But this resulted with Anakin not receiving dreams of her torture. Which means he never went to Tatooine, and instead went to Naboo. To await Padme's return, he originally fought hard to be a part of the rescue mission. But after Thyferra was given control of the rescue mission, his pleas were never heard. The Jedi Order sent him to Naboo to await Padme's eventual arrival while Obi-Wan went to Geonosis. Meaning he's on Naboo now, and according to the Jedi Council Kenobi just left Kamino. However, luckily we were about 15 hours away from Coruscant. So although the build-up changed, I think it will result in something similar. Anakin will likely go to save Obi-Wan, but just without Padme. Yoda will come and save them, but I'll work on ensuring more CAS ships are destroyed than in the original. The plan was simple, but the first attack fleet above Geonosis, and shoot down the defenseless core ships. But before that, I decided to go to sleep. The next day I woke up, we were still in space, approximately 3 hours away from Coruscant, and I decided to start a quick meeting. Namely with Rush Clovis, the CEO of Veridian Corporations. Ah, Count Thalron. What can I do for you? Clovis asked. Clovis had worked extremely hard during these last 10 years, creating multiple businesses. The most successful area was of course the medical area, completely owning the entire industry. The Veridian MedTech Corporation was now made up of hundreds of companies and owned 67% of the trade. His second most successful endeavor was the Fonder Drive Yards, being economically jump-started by Clovis by giving them all the ship contracts from Thyferra. This had developed into a company capable of creating an Imperator-class Star Destroyer within 4 months, an insane feat, and a Valiant class within 2 months. Well, Rush, I've decided we're in need of our own armor and weapon manufacturers. I also have the prepared design, I said as I put a small hard drive into the table. The Katarn-class armor Mk3 popped up in front of both of us. I suspect this armor will cost 7,000 to build and we'll sell it for 12,000 credits. I said watching as he went over the specs. It includes small deflector shields capable of diminishing all medium military hardware rifles and pistols blaster bolts. The energy would spread through the armor, heating it up and its pistols. I said and he looked shocked. To avoid the possibility of our troops being cooked alive inside the gun we created 2 dual blaster pistols, one on each arm, whom can be powered by said energy. I said. It includes 1 large backpack and the helmet have multiple HUD advantages, including night vision, eye protectors against flash grenades and sensors. Additionally, it includes a backpack with armament and grenades. The armor itself can take up to 2 shots from medium military blasters, make them white but give us an easy way to make it camo or black. Sadly it's gonna weight 20 kilos. I said. After a few seconds he looked beyond shocked before continuing. This armor is amazing. How many do you want me to produce? He asked. Enough for our entire army. Let's say the first batch will be about 800,000 units? I said, once again shocking him. You want me to create a company or take over an existing one? Rush asked. Up to you, but that's not all.
I wish to do the same but with guns.
I said, once again sliding something into the hard drive. I have 3 different blasters for you, the ARC 9965 blaster, Z6 rotary rifle and the T21 light repeating rifle. The ARC 9965 will be the standard blaster for both the Navy and the Army, even the city guards. Modified for 250 shots per magazine, weights 5 kilograms, with a tactical scope capable of zooming, includes stun, automatic and semi-automatic. A range of up to 2 kilometers at max, will likely cost between 1,000 to 1,500 to create.
Make about 800,000 of these in our first order.
I said. The Z6 rotary rifle is similar to the Z6 rotary cannon, however instead of 166 shots per second this one only packs 100 shots per second. However it has increased range and it weighs less. Additionally due to its rifle handle it is easier to aim and use in stationary positions. I said, and Rush nodded. The Z6 was an extremely efficient weapon having been used for a few years now. The mode I designed was the version used after the Clone Wars by a few. It had a rifle handle instead of the one used in the Clone Wars. It still had the forward handle for when you're standing though. I also told Rush to name it something different, although similar to qualifies for an entirely different rifle. I want about 200,000 of these created, I said before turning to the last weapon. The T21 light repeating rifle. Sadly this has already been created and as such you need to buy it from Blostech Industries. Buy a batch of 100,000 of this as well. This will work to deal a lot of damage, such as against heavy armored individuals or other obstacles requiring immense power. Or species whom can naturally take a few shots. I said and Rush Clovis began calculating. The T21 costs 2,000 credits. Due to buying in batch we could likely get it down to 1,700. It'll cost 380 million credits. Should be no problem at all. Rush said. Some might have problems with spending 300 million credits on a few pew-pews. However luckily for us, we have about 10 million millions. Meaning if it was a credit coin for 1 million, we'd have 10 million of them. Or we'd have that refreshed every year. We'd likely have close to 40 to 50 million millions. I can't lie it's fun to say that. And after that he updated me a bit on the business side before I cut the transmission after 2.5 hours of talking. As I cut it, I heard a knock on the door. "Come in," I said, and the door opened, well after I pressed a button to open it. And in came Padme, wearing the same outfit as she did when she visited Tatooine with Anakin. It was not the fighting gear but a white dress, revealing her stomach. As she approached, I couldn't help but stare. She looked truly beautiful in that dress. It showed her figure quite nicely. As she approached me, we both leaned in and kissed. A quick one. As we pulled apart, I looked her in the eyes. "You look so beautiful in that dress," I said, not that she wasn't at all times. She blushed a bit. "Thank you, Thalron.
"It's so good to finally be back and safe,"
she said with a smile. I put my hands around her waist before pulling her towards me, and we engaged in the typical French kiss. It was an interesting and painful journey, but in the end I'm glad we did,
I said in a slight breather before we connected our lips again.
After that we stopped it and simply enjoyed each of our presents as we began talking. After 15 minutes I turned to her. "So, I wanted to ask you, would you be fine with me sending a platoon of Sovereign Guards to guard you?"
50 men.
I said, and with that she became a bit reluctant. "It won't be permanently, but it's until I can get your own guards properly trained. If you give me your Naboo guards, I can train them and they'll meet my lowest expectations. Of course I'd prefer if you kept my guards at all times, but I'm sure you'd like privacy, so that's my compromise," I said, and she began thinking for a bit before she smiled. "Thank you, Thalron. I'm happy that you think of me as well. I agree," she said before we kissed again.
After that we separated before going our own way.
We had decided to keep it a bit hidden in the Senate. I didn't care if my council or guards knew, same with Padme, as long as the Senate didn't know quite yet, or specifically Palpatine. But we couldn't hide that. As we landed, I saw 5 blue individuals standing there. 4 Senate guards and Mos Amidus. We went straight to the Senate building. Once we entered Coruscant, Palpatine likely wanted to talk with us. And I was correct in assuming that. After all, why else would the Vice-Chancellor be there? As soon as we exited, he met us. "Senator Padme Amidala and Senator Thalron Veridian, I in the Supreme Chancellor's chair are so happy to finally see your return. The Chancellor has asked that you accompany me to his office," Mos Amidus said, but I could see it was just a formality. He probably didn't give a shit. And with that we followed him in silence, walking towards the Chancellor's office. As we arrived, we were met by Palpatine. Shockingly only him. I guess he wanted to be the first.
"Dear Senator Padme and Count Thalron, this old hearth is at rest to finally see both of yours return to this honorable establishment,"
he said before turning to Alexander. He stood behind me alongside John and Rob. They too had a nice welcoming chat with me yesterday.
"Lord Commandant Alexander, the Senate owes you a debt for finding these two as fast as you did. I do not know how you did it,
but you've done us all a great service. I am sure Thalron is proud of your work," Palpatine said. I don't quite know why he's congratulating Alexander. I could see that he was shocked as well. "Thank you, Chancellor.
It was my sworn duty,"
Alexander said, barely even letting anyone see he was shocked. Palpatine saw through him due to his perception. I did as well as I knew him, but I doubt anyone else did. "Well, in the meantime, Padme, your original assailant has been identified as Boba Fett. Obi-Wan is hunting him down as we speak," Palpatine said before smiling. "However, we still cannot ensue you're safe here. I ask you to return to Naboo. Padawan Anakin is there, waiting for you," he said, and Padme looked conflicted. I was as well, but hid it a lot more. I knew deep down that Padme likely had some slim feelings for Anakin, but although I knew that, I believed in Padme. I wasn't some love-hungry womanizer. No, I knew that I would not hunt down Padme. If she wanted to love Anakin, she would do that. Sure, I would be heartbroken, but love will never disappear. "I am sorry, Chancellor, but Count Thalron has offered me protection on Thyferra, and as thanks for his help I accepted.
We have become quite the good friends, and I feel it would be foolish to break our first proper meeting,"
Padme said, and I saw Palpatine look slightly shocked but nodded. He likely played to be shocked. I wouldn't believe that he wasn't beyond furious. I was fucking up his plans, from saving Shmi Skywalker, making Anakin, ending up not slaughtering the Tusken Raiders.
"I understand, Senator Padme Dash," he tried before Mos Amidus began whispering into his ear.
Out of the corner of my eyes I saw Mos Amidus got some information earlier.
"Ah yes, let them in,"
he told. Mos Amidus turned to us. "Dear Padme and Thalron, it seems our friend Obi-Wan Kenobi has reported on the current situation," he said as the door opened and the Jedi Strategic Command, including Yoda, Mace Windu and other members of both the Jedi Council and Loyalist Committee. It's finally starting. Chapter 59. The Confederacy is revealed. I tracked the bounty hunter Jango Fett to the droid foundries on Geonosis. The Trade Federation is to take delivery of a droid army here, and it is clear that Viceroy Gunray is behind the assassination attempt on Senator Amidala. The Commerce Guilds and the Corporate Alliance have both pledged their armies to Count Dooku and are forming a dash, Obi-Wan said, until he was attacked by a droideka.
Wait, he said as we all heard.
But at last the droideka came into view and it cut out. "Those are droidekas, droids that have deflector shields," I said first. "More happening on Kenobi, I feel, than has been revealed," Yoda said as he turned around. "I agree," Mace Windu said before turning to Anakin.
Anakin, stay where you are, you'll join a potential attack. Mace said as Anakin appeared in place of Obi-Wan. He looked around and spotted me and Padme. I could see his eyes widen and he wanted to say something, but as our eyes connected I shook my head. Master Windu? If I may, I do not mean to intrude upon your area of command, but considering Anakin's closest was to Geonosis, he could attempt to scout the droid foundries or attempt to break out Obi-Wan, or determine if he still lives. I said. Mace Windu's head turned harshly towards me. I do not think that would be wise. We do not recklessly risk our Palawans, Count.
Mace Windu shot my suggestion down.
From a strategic standpoint, sound it is. But can Anakin do that? Unknown it is. The droid army, vast and mysterious it is.
Yoda said, welcoming any argument. Precisely why knowing a bit of information is needed.
And a Jedi is the best suited for that. Especially one that Count Dooku would not recognize.
I said, and Yoda began thinking. Strong argument.
That is.
Yoda said before taking a pause.
Very well, head to Geonosis. Young Anakin will, find intelligness he shall.
Yoda said, and I could see Anakin looking at me gratefully.
He silently turned his eyes towards Padme before leaving, but all of the Jedi, me and Palpatine spotted it.
Even Padme did.
The Commerce Guilds are preparing for war, there can be no doubt of that. Senator Organa said as he walked back and forth. Count Dooku must have made a treaty with them, Palpatine said, but one of the other senators began speaking. Don't quite know nor care who it is. The debate is over. Now we need that clone army. He said in his own language. I barely even understood that.
Sadly the derange is not over. The Senate will never approve the use of clones. Organa said.
And the judicial forces cannot fight back against the separatist.
I said as Mace Windu turned to me.
Nor can the Jedi properly fight against them.
He said.
We might be able to hold on to the core worlds by combining my faction and the judicials, but the war faction would never send their forces when knowing they would abandon their area.
I said, they all nodded. Understanding it. This is a crisis.
The Senate must vote the Chancellor emergency powers. He can then approve of the clone army.
Mos Amidus said at last.
But what senator would have the courage to propose such a radical amendment?
Palpatine said, wanting a senator to step forward.
I will do it,
Padme said as she stepped forward. She did not even look at me, and my heart jumped at that.
I always knew I could not control Padme. No, we were both strong in our own areas. We collectively understood and could argue about senatorial matters, but in the end we were both senators of different planets.
Very good now.
What will we do about this clone army? Palpatine asked as we all went silent. The clones won't require payment, which will make logistics and it will not be such a burden on our monetary funds.
Mos Amidus said.
The information Obi-Wan sent states that the Kaminoans have trained both naval crewmen and support staff.
Mace Windu said.
Meaning they won't require payment as well. A certain bald lady said, though I do not know her name.
You want to disband the judicial forces? I said, rather plainly.
Sadly, that will be necessary.
Mos Amidus said.
If we are to finance these millions of clones, we cannot have difference in our lines. We cannot put two different armies in the same battle. It will create chaos. It's a milder consequence of having solidars and droids fight together, other than we cannot sacrifice the droids.
The Mustafarian said, and I was getting angry. Firstly, these clones are not droid.
They are unfortunate human beings that was created. But instead of coming out of a womb they came out of a droid, and they have a lower lifespan.
I said angrily. Agree, with Count Thalron. I do. We cannot sacrifice these clones, they must be treated humanely.
Yoda said and I nodded. And secondly, by recklessly dismissing the judicial forces we'll be inviting Count Dooku to grab them.
I said and everyone began thinking that second. I was correct. We would be feeding the enemy. What do you suggest, Count?
Palpatine asked and I turned to look at him, concentrating as hard as possible to tell him that I'm calling my favor.
I suggest you allow me to recruit these judicials.
The war faction is struggling with proper manpower. This will build the Republic's reserve forces. If you agree to this, I'll get them to agree that we are to assist if the Republic is pushed into the core.
I said, offering a solution and boon. Luckily Palpatine understood my message and began talking.
You have done a great job with the war faction, and your military have grown. You have also shown immense loyalty towards the Republic by taking security of an entire sector into your hands. I am a strong advocate for this.
He said. Padme also helped.
The war faction was also recently dealt a major blow by the Separatist, poaching their entire senior membership. The hate between the war faction and the Separatist are known, they would not betray us.
Padme said.
Plus they'd be easy to recruit back after the war if necessary. They'll improve each planet's defenses and then they can come back if required.
Bail Organa said and I smiled.
Very good. We shall inform the judicial forces of their dismissal but invite into the planetary defense forces of the war faction. I suppose you'll handle it, Count Thalron?
Palpatine decided.
Yes, Your Excellency.
I said, and with that the topic was over.
Now, how shall the Jedi serve in this upcoming war?
Plo Koon asked.
The thing that was on everyone's mind. I would suggest they serve as generals of the clone units.
I said, taking the words straight out of Palpatine's mouth. He smiled happily at me, happy someone else agreed with his work. The Jedi does not have military training. Their knowledge extend only on how to swing a sword. The Malastare guy said. I screwed around in my mind until I realized his name. Ascok I think it was. The honorable delegation from Malastare. Correct is.
Command training, Jedi do not have.
Yoda said before turning to me.
Solidars, Jedi are not.
Yoda said. Palpatine wanted to speak but I did so before him. Grandmaster, Senator Ock, you both have strong points, but you forget. Jedi are prominently protectors, but if the CIS wins, what will the Jedi protect? We all must make sacrifices in this war. I've even offered my entire fleet to the Republic, leaving my home defenseless. I said before turning to the Malastare guy. The Jedi can be assisted, the clones have their own commanders, as long as the Jedi knows of their shortcomings and listen, then there will be no problems, and if we put judicials in charge, they will send the clones on suicide missions. It's stupid to believe the judicials would forget that the clones are taking their jobs. Jedi are known for respecting and helping all organic beings. Clones are organic. And they are solidars. If their lives are meaninglessly sacrificed by the orders of an angry man, then we would suffer immense losses. I said, everyone listening to our speech. This is both by a pure strategic motive but also regarding the clones. There is also a reason I said, Generals, the Jedi are nightmares on the battlefield. Additionally they are facing droids, they would not be slaughtering human beings. An admiral will command their fleets, and the Jedi shall lead the ground troops. It's the most effective use of Jedi. I said, finally ending my speech. I agree with Count Thalron. The Jedi largely remove the danger to the clones from the Republic, except the very few Jedi whom does not consider creations alive, Padme said. After a few seconds silence before I spoke again. We cannot beat the separatist forces by sheer numbers. We must focus on quality and individual strength. The clones have trained their entire life, and so have the Jedi. A life of training ensures perfect competence from both sides. The precision of the clones and the close combat and ability to block shots ensures a perfectly compatible elite force. I said, and with that those few whom had doubts suddenly lost that. Great arguments and solutions, Count Thalron. We all appreciate your professional opinion on this. If there are no objections we'll announce the Jedi as generals. Palatine said, waiting for an answer. Then it is decided, in the case of the potential creation of the clone army, it has been decided that the Jedi shall serve as Jedi. Now who shall command the army? The position of Supreme Commander shall be given to the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic, but we need a Grand Admiral, Grand General and Strategic Command. Palpatine said. Immediately after the Mustafar Committee jumped. Gra, Gorga Fafgaru, we would gladly present Mustafarian Foka Susek as a potential Grand Admiral. He is the Admiral of our planetary defense fleet, he said. Everyone looked at them for a second. Who would they send a random-ass guy? The Mustafar Committee overstepped. I would suggest Count Thalron or any representative of him to the position of Grand Admiral. He leads the largest naval force and he has fought multiple battles. Bail Organa said. I agree was Padme's response. So do I, said a voice I did not expect. Mace Windu. I do not know why but I would not disapprove. Agree I do. Yoda said. And with that everyone said their ayes or nays. And in the end it became 1-10, the Mustafar Committee being the only one. It has been decided then, Count Thalron Veridian will be appointed as Grand Admiral of the Republic Navy. Do you wish to represent them yourself in the Senate or find yourself one? Let me remind you that you can only represent one power. Palpatine said and I began thinking. As the representative of the Navy I could not join a faction, so I won't. I lead one currently and I am complacent with that. I shall stay as Senator of Thyferra, I said and Palpatine nodded. Now, on to the position of Grand General. Palpatine said once again. Malastare of course suggest a guy nobody knew of nor had any feats. Orn Free Taa suggested a Ryloth general, not Syndulla. I suggest Grandmaster Yoda, and if he cannot then Master Windu. I said, the Jedi were suggested anyone would suggest them, thinking senators would work together to grab that chance. And as the Jedi could not suggest anyone they had given up hope. If chosen, accept. I will. Yoda said. Why the Jedi, as you said before the Jedi have no command experience? Bail asked. Master Yoda is without the wisest one in this room. He's lived for hundreds of years and seen multiple conflicts. I cannot see a scenario where he would fail. If we assign him someone who knows of the army formations to assist him, it would work perfectly. I said. And with that the voting began. 2-9 it came up as, Yoda was given the rank. Lastly for strategic command, the decision was 12 generals and 12 admirals, upon the discretion of the Grand General and Grand Admiral. Yoda of course, chose the 12 members of the Jedi High Council. I meanwhile had a harder time. Chapter 60. The Start. The next exact day Padme announced the vote to give Supreme Chancellor Palpatine emergency powers. The vote of course resulted in a resounding aye. Especially from the war faction, I have never seen those planets as excited as they are. I guess they felt threatened by the separatist movement and the potential threat those Outer Rim worlds would present to their own respective planets. Immediately after, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine declared the formation of a Grand Army of the Republic. And with that I laid back in my seat and sighed. It's finally beginning, the Clone Wars.
After it was decided, I walked out and turned to my left. My steadfast guards John and Rob followed me as I met Grand Master Yoda and Master Mace Windu.
Greetings, Master Yoda and Master Windu.
Or shall I say General?
I said with a smile, which they clearly didn't think was funny. For the Jedi to become general, difficult it is.
The future, hard to see it is.
Yoda said, and I nodded.
Well, Grand Master Yoda, I'm heading to Kamino to organize and welcome this new clone army. Do you wish to join me?
I asked. Join you. I shall. Yoda said, and I nodded. We're leaving early tomorrow, at 9 o'clock.
Senator Padme will be joining us to formally introduce the Kaminoans to the Republics.
I said, and Yoda nodded. And with that I walked off.
It was currently late night, the vote having been called the same day as the message from Kenobi was sent. After that I went to my room and sat down at my desk. Now then, Admiral Trench had taken the first attack fleet with him back to the Veridian sector.
He was currently on the Corellian run heading back home. I honestly expected it to be a few more days until this shit started. I connected my comms to the HoloNet, the central communications network connecting all the sectors, planets, and system. Although some had a better connection than others and you required specific transmitters to transmit messages over long distances. I then connected my HoloNet code to the one pre-given by Trench. As the call began, a naval officer showed up.
My lord,
he said as he bowed.
Get Admiral Trench, I have a task for him.
I said, and the officer saluted me before running off. As I was waiting I began thinking of my fleets.
The second home fleet was commanded by Grand Admiral Jaime, while the third sector defense fleet was originally commanded by Yularen. But as I wanted him to command a Republic fleet, I has given the position to someone else, Vice Admiral Flint. He had served me well during these last 10 years and rose to the rank of Admiralty. He was the one who led the blockade of Topan.
I'd need to reposition my fleets. I'd likely bring the home fleet to the moon between Thyferra and Yagtul or just have it stay as Yagtul. There were only 2 no entrances to the Tapalo over sector, now the Veridian sector's core. There were 2 entrances to the Veridian sector, or 20th sector. One way was through Runa by the Rima trade route. Runa was a part of the Veridian sector, but it was 7 minutes away from Yagtul, an easy jump. However, to get towards Thyferra and the core planets you'd need to pass Yagtul as well. The other way was by taking the Corellian trade spire from the core and then stop at Folis, which was outside the Veridian sector, and take the Skipwright's trace to Fonder. I'd likely send Trench away for war, send the second home fleet to Yagtul, the third sector defense fleet to Folis, and continue building up my fourth fleet. I knew the first 4 months would be somewhat relaxed with both sides trying to capture as many hyperlanes as possible. That's when Trench walked into the room, the 6-armed spider. Though he did walk on his own feet, so not fully a spider. TSK. Greetings, m'lord. I heard you had a TSK task for me. TSK. Trench asked while walking in with his 4 hands behind his back. His TSK was a bit annoying at first, but I got used to it. I have a task for you. Recent information has informed me that the Coppered Alliance, Guild Corporations, Banking Clan, Trade Federation and Techno Union has signed a treaty, giving their armies to counter Dooku and the Separatist Alliance. I told Trench and he smiled. I could see excitement and happiness spread through his body. Trench's true nature was that of a predator, and that would show in battle. TSK. Finally, the galaxy has entered war again. Trench said excitedly. It's good that you're excited and motivated. Your mission is simple. Take the first attack fleet to the Rishi system. You'll join the Republic armies at the attack. I'll be sending information about the new Republic army later. I said. Trench looked shocked at the original thought of a Republic army but understood. He would wait for the information. TSK. I understand, my count. I suppose you want M to take the Looker Hulks as well? TSK. Trench asked and I nodded. Correct, I'll personally give you new orders after the upcoming battle, but I want you to prepare tactics against the droid army and fleet. They're likely to have Munificence and Looker Hulks in their fleet, deduce their strength and weaknesses, and then create a database on it and send it to the fleet. I said. I know this would be a lot of work, but you've served in the corporate fleet before and you know them the best. I expect great results from you, Admiral. I said. TSK. I appreciate the honor you've given me, my count. TSK. I will not fail you. He said and I smiled at that. Good job, Trench. You'll be rewarded once we win the war. I said, and with that I cut the connection. I moved my communications towards Grand Admiral Jaime as the same happened once again, but this time I was met straight with the aging man's face. But he was still in his 50s. Greetings, my count. Jaime said as he bowed. Stand up, Jaime. I've got orders for you and your fleet. I said and he stood up. The Separatist has created their own army and fleet. They're likely to declare war on the Republic within a few rotations, and we must prepare. You are to deploy the second home fleet upon Yagtul. Order Deputy Director Haruz Ison of the Veridian Intelligence Agency to deduce if any planets within the Veridian sector is deserting to the Separatist. I said and he looked shocked at first before understanding. Understood. Count Thalron. It seems your prediction was correct. Jaime said and I smiled. I had already informed my council of the inevitable war. I'm going to be writing a document for the naval officers. Pass on the message to Prime Minister Jason. Tell him to publicly picture any Separatist deserters at traders of the Veridian sector and will not be safe from the Thyferra wrath. I said and Jaime smiled. He too, like Trench knew that war was an area of potential. Understood, my lord.
I'll pass it on,
Jamie said, and I nodded, cancelling the connection.
After that I began writing an announcement to my officers, informing them of the incoming war.
However, I would only tell the top officers and those I trust. We would be launching a surprise attack, and informing potential spies of my knowing is not that. And after that I went to sleep. The following morning I found myself aboard my own personal ship, the Skmitter. Yes, Maul's original ship.
After a lot of time clearing it for any bombs and trackers, I had began utilizing it for myself.
It included a cloaking device allowing me to disappear from eyesight and sensors. I had modified it with a Class 0.5 hyperdrive and increased its speed. I had removed a lot of its cargo and created a few extra passenger seats, letting it carry 15 men. And as such I had 12 Royal Guarda with me and 2 available spaces for Grand Master Yoda and Padme. Concerning Padme, it was slowly and surely growing. We had taken it slowly, deciding to build feelings instead of jumping straight ahead into the shit. And so instead we had taken it slow. We had spent a lot of time together. We had even went on a date on Coruscant. But other than that we had a few arguments, mainly regarding Senate politics, but that was to be expected. I was a strong advocate for military might, while Padme was a strong advocate for diplomacy. But those never caused problems. I made sure to keep them civilized, never getting angry and listening to her arguments. And this had done wonders to our relationship, building trust on both sides and making it easier for both of us. That was when I spotted Padme. She always had an exotic choice of clothes. She spent a lot of time picking out dresses and had a large variety of clothes. She was currently spotting her usual purple Senate gown with a double-wing headwear above her head. I was spotting a white long-sleeved shirt, black dress pants, and lastly a gray men's trench coat, tightly fitting my arms and going to under my waist. As she approached me, we both gave each other a few kisses as I put my arms around her. "You look stunning," said before we engaged once again. "So do you, quite manly," she said playfully, before walking towards the ship. "It fits your back quite nicely," I said, looking at her walking up.
And with that she stumbled and looked at me with a blush before walking onto the ship.
I smiled before turning to the elevator leading up to the hangar. And it opened, revealing a little green guy. As he walked up to me I smiled. "Greetings, Grand Master Yoda, or would you prefer Grand General?" I asked as Yoda smiled. "Never fail to be humorous, you do.
However, work on it you shall,"
Yoda said, and I began chuckling. "Of course, Master Yoda.
I'll be sure to get myself a tutor," I said as I made way for him to walk forward. I stepped beside him.
"However, Master Yoda, I ask your permission to take lead in the formation of our army. There are a lot of areas that must be discussed, including the combination of Jedi and clones, formation of special forces, their formations and other areas," I said, and Yoda turned to me. "The professional you are. But learn I must. Take charge you may. But watch and listen I will," Yoda said, and I smiled. It was good to have him learn as fast as possible.
"That will be more than fine,"
I said as we walked into the ship.
Forget I did.
Mace Windu, taking a Jedi Force to rescue Kenobi. He is. Rush to help him as soon as possible. We must. Wait on Kamino, we cannot.
Leave immediately after, we must,"
Yoda said, and I nodded. "Of course, I've sent my fleet to Rishi to ensure surprise attacks are made. Never know where spies exist. I'll make sure to have my fleet join the rescue mission," I said as we reached Yoda's soon. "This is your room, Master Yoda. We'll arrive in 5 days," I told him while pointing at his large room. Thank you, Senator Thalron, or Grand Admiral is it, he said before chuckling and walking in, closing the door behind him with the force. I chuckled to myself before I headed to Padme's room.